Good evening, or perhaps I should say, good midnight. You found me here, where the world grows quiet, where the streets are empty, where the only sound is the hush of your own breath. This is the hour when stories wake, when shadows slip closer, when forgotten places remember their names. Tonight, I'll be your companion, a voice to guide you through the stillness. We will travel together not on bright highways or crowded rooms, but down corridors lined with whispers, into houses that keep secrets, across meadows where silence is never empty. You don't need to stay awake. In fact, you may drift, your eyes growing heavy as the hours unravel. The stories will keep speaking, whether you listen or dream. That's the way of tales told at midnight. They seep in slowly, like fog under a door. So lie back, let the dark surround you, and listen, because the night is long, and we are only at the beginning. Story 1. The Whisper in the Mirror. They say that every city apartment has its ghosts. Some are just echoes of arguments bleeding through thin walls, footsteps overhead that never seem to stop, or the faint hum of the elevator shaft that rattles like a dying throat. But sometimes the ghost isn't sound at all. Sarah didn't believe in that sort of thing. Not really. She believed in rent, and rent alone. And when she found the one bedroom on the corner of West 146th, tucked between a laundromat and a Dominican bakery, she signed the lease without thinking twice. The building was old but not beautiful, modernized just enough to trick you into thinking the bones weren't crumbling beneath the plaster. The realtor called it cozy. And her first night there, she wandered through the half-lit rooms with bare feet, the air still smelling faintly of fresh paint and something else beneath it, something metallic, like coins left too long in the mouth. She set her boxes down, feeling the strange quiet of a space that hadn't decided yet if it belonged to her. That was when she saw it. The mirror. It was leaning against the wall in the bedroom, tall and narrow, framed in dark wood that had cracked with age. It hadn't been listed in the inventory, nor did the landlord mention it, the kind of antique you'd expect to see in the back of a thrift store, standing among discarded furniture, waiting to be claimed or ignored forever. Sarah crouched in front of it, brushing her fingers along the carved edges. The wood was warm, though the room itself was chilled from the draft of an old window. Her own reflection blinked back at her, tired, hair loose from the move, lips dry from the winter air. She thought of dragging it to the curb, but something made her stop. There was a pull to it, not beautiful, not valuable, but insistent. That night, she left it standing where it was. The first whisper came the second night. Sarah woke at 3:12 a.m. Her phone told her so, throat dry, pulse fast for no reason she could name. The room was dark except for the glow of passing headlights seeping through the blinds. She turned her head toward the mirror, and for the briefest second she thought she saw movement. Not herself, not exactly. Something like the flutter of breath fogging glass, and then soft, barely audible, a hush that slid into her ears like silk. Sarah. Her name, or something close to it. She sat up, heart hammering now, staring at her own shadowed reflection. Nothing moved, no sound, just the radiator ticking, just the night breathing. She pressed her palms against her ears, held still, nothing. When morning came, she convinced herself it was nothing more than the exhaustion of moving, a dream she'd half woken into. But all day, even at work, she thought of it. She thought of the warmth of the wood under her fingertips. She thought of how the glass seemed deeper than it should have been, as though if she leaned close enough, she might fall in. By the end of the week, she had stopped telling herself it was imagination, because the whispers came back. Not every night, not always her name. Sometimes they were softer, less words than shapes of breath, but sometimes they spoke things she had not told anyone, things she had buried, the kind of secrets that crawl in the dark when you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, certain no one knows, and yet the mirror whispered them back to her, like a confidant, like a confession, like a promise. The city outside lived on a rhythm of its own: horns, sirens, drunken voices climbing the stairwell at impossible hours, but Sarah began to notice how the mirror made those sounds fade. The moment she turned toward it, the street below seemed to hush, as though the glass swallowed everything else. The whispers did not arrive immediately. They were patient, waiting for her attention. She would lie in bed staring at the faint silhouette of herself, until the first strands of sound drifted into the room. At first, like before, only the softest suggestion of breath. But over the nights, words began to take shape. "You never told him the truth, did you?" Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was not hers, not the echo of her own thoughts. It was quieter, cooler, threaded with a certainty that made denial feel pointless. She sat up slowly, blanket clutched to her chest. What truth?" she whispered, though no one was there to answer. The glass glimmered faintly in the streetlight glow, and again the voice came. "You knew it would end, long before you said the words." Sarah's skin prickled, her heart folding into itself. The memory rose sharp and bitter, the argument with Daniel, the slammed door, the hollow in her chest afterward. She had never told anyone how long she had carried that knowledge, that seed of ending. Yet here it was, whispered back to her by a piece of furniture left behind. She pressed her hand against her face, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle. "Stress," she muttered into the dark. "Too much stress, that's all." But when she lowered her hand, she saw her reflection had not moved with her. For a moment, no longer than a blink, her mirrored self stared with eyes too wide, lips parted as though in mid-speech, while she herself sat silent. Then it snapped back, ordinary again, just her own tired face. The days began to stretch thin. She moved through them distracted, coffee cooling untouched on her desk, words from coworkers slipping past her like smoke. She found herself hurrying home as though the apartment were not merely a place of rest, but of necessity, as though she needed to be near the glass, to hear what else it might tell her. It became a ritual. She would set her bag down, kick off her shoes, and draw the blinds just enough to leave the room in half light. Then she would sit on the edge of the bed and wait. The mirror, patient as a predator, gave nothing until she settled, until her mind began to wander, until her defenses thinned. "You lied to her too." Hare's stomach tightened. "Your mother. You told her you were happy, but you weren't. You wanted to leave. You always wanted to leave." The voice was not cruel, not yet. It was measured, deliberate, like someone reading aloud from a diary she had not written but had lived all the same. Sarah pressed her palms against her knees, breathing slow, afraid that if she interrupted it, the whispers would stop. "Why should secrets remain buried when they belong to you?" the voice asked. And then silence, only her own breathing, only the faint hum of the radiator. Sarah swallowed hard, throat aching, and turned away, yet found herself glancing back within seconds. The mirror did not change, but she swore the glass gleamed brighter when she stared too long, as though lit from somewhere behind. That night, she dreamed of water. She was standing knee-deep in a black river, the current dragging at her legs, while on the opposite shore, a woman's silhouette waited, still as stone. The woman raised a hand, beckoning, but when Sarah tried to move forward, her own reflection surged up from the water and caught her wrist. Cold fingers, familiar fingers, her own. She woke gasping, the sheets tangled, her heart thrashing against her ribs. The mirror stood quietly in the corner, reflecting nothing but the dim gray of early dawn. Yet she knew, deep down, that the whisper would return again. And when it did, she would listen. It began with insistence. The mirror no longer waited for her to come close, no longer played coy with the silence of the room. By the third week, the voice knew when she returned home. It greeted her before she had even set her keys down, the words so soft and immediate she could almost mistake them for the echo of her own thoughts. "Don't take your shoes off. Come here first." Sarah froze the first time it happened, one hand on the strap of her bag. She told herself it was nothing, the bleed of exhaustion through her mind. Yet her body obeyed before her reason did. She stepped closer, each breath shallow, her pulse a low tremor behind her ribs. The mirror seemed darker now, the edges swallowing light as though dusk had collected there alone. "You've missed me," it whispered, her throat tightened. "I know," but she had. The admission sat like a stone in her chest, undeniable. She had counted down the hours at her desk, tapping her pen until her coworker glanced at her with irritation. She had skipped after-work drinks, skipped grocery runs, eager to return to the empty apartment where the glass waited. "Yes," the voice said gently, as though soothing her denial. "You always miss me." Sarah sat down on the bed, her knees nearly touching the frame. Her reflection stared back, pale, hair mussed from the wind. But her eyes looked more awake in the mirror than she felt in her own body. "You can trust me," the whisper went on. "I know the things you bury. I know the things you wish you could say out loud." It began to tell her stories, not the way a friend does, not anecdotes or comfort, but recollections she had never shared. The day he left, you counted the cracks in the ceiling. Do you remember? 34. Her breath hitched. She had traced them, desperate for distraction, while Daniel shouted, while his footsteps stamped the wood floor, while her heart begged him to stay, though her mouth could not form the words. She had never spoken of it, not once. You remember the dream of the stairwell, don't you? The one that kept repeating when you were 17. You never told anyone. Her stomach twisted. It was true, she had walked those endless stairs night after night, the dream chasing her into daylight until it finally faded. Forgotten, or at least buried deep enough to stop hurting. Until now. Why should you suffer with silence? The mirror breathed. Let me keep your secrets. Let me hold them for you. All you need to do is listen. Days blurred. Sarah drifted through them like someone sleepwalking, aware only in fragments. She ate when her stomach cramped, showered when her skin itched with sweat. Her coworkers' voices dulled, their faces strange in fluorescent light. Every moment she was away from the apartment felt heavy, like standing underwater. Movement slowed, senses dulled. At night she came alive again. She would sit before the mirror with the blinds half drawn, a single lamp burning low. The voice poured into her like warm smoke, curling through her mind, soft and insistent. It began to suggest things, small things at first. You don't have to answer her text. She doesn't care about you the way she pretends. Throw out the letter. You don't need the reminder. Stay inside tonight, safer here. The suggestion slipped beneath her skin, not commands, but nudges, subtle enough to feel like her own decisions, and she followed them, each one easier than the last. Then the tone shifted. It was a Wednesday, the kind of damp evening when the air tastes of rust and rain. Sarah came home soaked, shoes squeaking against the hallway floor. She dropped her bag, wiped her hands on her coat, and without thinking, turned toward the mirror. "Welcome back," it whispered. Something in the timbre chilled her. The voice was sharper, less like smoke, and more like a blade drawn against stone. "You're tired of being overlooked, aren't you?" it asked. Sarah's breath stalled. "You work until your eyes ache. They thank you with silence. They forget you until they need something. You're invisible to them." She shook her head, whispering, "That's not," but the voice pressed harder, overlapping her denial. "You deserve more. You deserve to be heard. Don't you agree?" Her reflection leaned forward, just slightly, enough to make her flinch. Her throat felt raw. "I just want to rest." "You will. But first, you need to make them listen." That night, Sarah dreamed again, not of water this time, but of rooms she did not recognize. Narrow hallways lined with closed doors, all mirrors instead of wood. She walked barefoot, the tiles icy beneath her skin, each reflection showing her at a different age. Child, teenager, 21, and lost. 25 and broken-hearted. Each reflection whispered, voices overlapping into a chorus that swelled until the walls trembled. "Tell them. Make them hear. Make them pay." She woke with a strangled cry, lungs burning, and staggered to the bathroom sink. The tap squealed, water spilling into her palms. She splashed her face, gasping, gripping the porcelain until her knuckles whitened. When she lifted her gaze to the bathroom mirror, her reflection smiled. She did not. The whispers grew bold after that. They spoke while she cooked, while she brushed her teeth, while she dressed for work. She tried ignoring them, humming to herself, turning music up on her phone. But the glass voice threaded through it all, weaving itself beneath sound, rising in the quiet between breaths. "You're wasting time. Look at them pretending to be your friends. She thinks she's better than you." Sarah clamped her hands over her ears, but the words bloomed inside her skull. She pressed harder until her temples ached, yet the whisper only grew clearer, as though distance meant nothing. "You've given enough. Now it's their turn." She began to avoid people, lunch breaks alone, headphones in though no music played. Her coworkers whispered. She knew they did. Glances traded across desks. At first she told herself she was imagining it, paranoia clawing through her thoughts. But then she saw her reflection in a darkened monitor, her reflection, not her, and its lips moved in time with the whispers. They are laughing at you. They think you are small. The rage came sudden and unsteady, like a storm rolling in without warning. She clenched her fists beneath the desk until her nails dug half-moons into her palms. When a coworker asked if she was all right, she nearly snapped, nearly shouted, nearly let the voice spill through her mouth, but she swallowed it, the taste bitter as bile. That night, the mirror did not wait. The moment she stepped inside, the voice surged. You let them walk over you. Every day. Do you want to stay invisible forever? No, she whispered, throat tight, then stopped letting them breathe so easily. Her skin chilled. What do you mean? The glass shimmered faintly, her reflection darker, almost hollow-eyed. The voice bent closer, so close she swore she felt the breath on her cheek. Make them listen. Make them suffer, as you suffered. Sarah stumbled back, spine striking the wall. I can't. The mirror vibrated with soundless laughter, the glass rippling as though water pressed from the other side. You already want to. That's why I'm here. To remind you. Her knees weakened. She pressed both hands against her head, desperate to shut it out. But the voice filled her skull like liquid filling a vessel. You know their weak spots. You've always known. All it takes is one choice. For days afterward, Sarah drifted in a haze of dread. The voice receded during daylight, never gone but quieter, as though conserving its strength. She tried leaving the apartment, staying late at the library, sitting in coffee shops until her eyes burned. Yet when she returned, no matter the hour, the whisper greeted her like a lover waiting at the door. You can't run, it said. I live where you live. I breathe where you breathe. You and I are the same. She screamed once, tearing her throat raw, hurling a mug against the wall until it shattered. The sound echoed, sharp and violent, but the mirror did not so much as flicker. Her reflection stared back, lips curving in a smile that never reached her eyes. You'll see, it promised. It feels better once you stop resisting. And yet, beneath the terror, Sarah felt something else growing. A hunger. It was faint at first, buried beneath panic and denial. But with each night, it pulsed stronger. She caught herself imagining the faces of those who had slighted her, picturing their surprise if she spoke the words she never dared to say, if she acted on the impulses she smothered. The voice fanned those embers, blowing gently, coaxing the flame. You deserve release, it said. You deserve justice. And Sarah sat before the mirror, trembling, hands clasped so tight her knuckles burned. Her reflection leaned forward, closer than the glass should allow, eyes glittering with hunger. Let me guide you, it whispered. Let me show you what you're capable of. The city outside carried on, oblivious, the bakery closing, the laundromat humming, the hum of neon signs buzzing into night. But in that dim bedroom, beneath the weight of the mirror's gaze, Sarah knew something had shifted. The line between her thoughts and the whisper blurred, between her reflection and her body dissolved. She was no longer certain where she ended, and the mirror began. And that was when the urging truly began. New York nights have their own heartbeat. The kind of pulse you feel through the floorboards' taxi horns 2 blocks away, the low rumble of the subway, a distant shout that fades before you can place it. For weeks, Sarah had tried to sync her own body to that rhythm, grounding herself in the ordinary chaos of the city. But the mirror had given her a new pulse, a deeper one that throbbed in her chest and skull until the outside world seemed like nothing more than background static. By the 4th week, her apartment felt less like a home and more like a stage. Every object existed only to frame her and the mirror. The bed, the lamp, the curtains, the faint scuffs on the floorboards. She began to suspect that the rest of the apartment might dissolve entirely if she looked away for too long. The whisper had changed. It no longer waited to be invited. It did not soothe. It commanded. Don't eat, it told her one night when she reheated a bowl of soup. You don't need it. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but the voice was louder than the ache. She poured the soup down the drain, watching the steam curl upward like a vanishing spirit. Don't answer her call, it insisted when her phone lit up with her mother's name. She only wants to hear herself talk. Sarah pressed her thumb against the decline button, pulse spiking with guilt, but the whisper hummed approval. You're learning. The city grew harsher as she retreated further inside herself. Winter wind funneled down the avenues, rattling window panes. Sarah caught her reflection in subway glass, in the dark gleam of shop windows, and each time she swore it lingered a second too long, mouth-shaping words she could not hear over the rush of traffic. At work, she barely spoke. Her co-workers' chatter blurred into white noise, yet the whisper fed her observations, twisting them like threads. She thinks you're pathetic. Oh, he's waiting for you to fail. They laugh when you're not listening. Sarah began to believe it. Every shared glance became mockery, every smile a sneer in disguise. One night, she came home later than usual. The laundromat was closing, the bakery dark, the street lamps flickering against wet asphalt. She paused in the stairwell, hand on the railing, heart thudding with the sudden certainty that something waited behind her door. When she pushed it open, the apartment was quiet, too quiet. No ticking radiator, no hum of traffic, only the mirror waiting in its corner. She tried to walk past it, straight to the kitchen, but her reflection turned its head before she did. Come here. Her knees locked. The whisper wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a voice, clear and sharp, filling the room though no lips moved. Closer. She obeyed. Steps slow, breath unsteady. The glass gleamed faintly though no lamp was on. Her reflection leaned forward, eyes dark, lips curling into the faintest smile. You've been holding back, it said. Sarah shook her head. You know I can't. You can, and you will. Don't you see? They made you this way. They ignored you, used you, discarded you. Now it's your turn. The nights grew longer inside that room. Time warped. Sometimes she woke with no memory of falling asleep, her body stiff on the floor in front of the mirror, the imprint of the wooden frame pressed into her cheek. Sometimes she found objects moved her hairbrush on the kitchen counter, a glass of water balanced on the windowsill. Practice, the voice explained. Small things first. You need to trust me, but practice for what? The breaking point came on a Friday. Sarah had left work early, claiming illness. She stumbled home through sleet, shoulders hunched, hair plastered against her face. Her body ached with a bone-deep weariness, but the moment she opened the door, energy surged like electricity snapping down a wire. The mirror glowed faintly in the dark, as though lit from within. Tonight, it said. Sarah dropped her bag, trembling. Tonight what? Tonight you stop pretending. Tonight you let go. Her reflection's eyes were not hers anymore. They burned, bottomless, pulling her forward. She stepped closer without thinking, the glass fogging faintly as if she exhaled against it, though her lips never parted. You know who deserves it, the voice urged. Images surged unbidden her supervisor's face, smug behind his desk. The friend who stopped returning calls. Daniel, with his storm of accusations and that final slammed door. Each image pulsed like a wound reopening. They don't see you, the voice pressed. Make them remember you. Sarah's breath quickened, her pulse slamming against her ribs. I can't, she whispered. Yes, you can. You've already imagined it, haven't you? Her hands shook. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Late at night, in flashes of anger and loneliness, she had pictured what it would be like to shout until their faces paled, to slam her fists, to break something just so they finally looked at her. The mirror shimmered. Her reflection reached forward, palm flattening against the glass. The wood frame groaned softly, like a throat clearing itself. Touch me, the voice commanded. Sarah raised her hand, trembling. When her skin met the glass, it was not cold. It was warm, pulsing faintly, as though a heartbeat thudded beneath. See? The whisper coaxed, now soft again, intimate. You were never alone. I am with you. Always. That night, she dreamed of blood. Not gore, not violence, just the smell. Coppery, metallic, filling the air as though the city itself bled. She walked the avenues barefoot, red footprints trailing behind her, and every window showed her reflection smiling, smiling, smiling. When she woke, the taste lingered on her tongue. The mirror gleamed in the half-light of dawn, and Sarah knew something irreversible had begun. Sarah had stopped keeping track of days. The calendar above her desk was still frozen on the second week of the month, the squares blank, as though nothing had happened since she moved in. Yet she knew the season had shifted, her breath fogged in the stairwell, her hands stiff with cold when she fumbled with the keys. Inside, though, the apartment was always warm, stifling even, The radiator hissed constantly, the air thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves exhaled. And in that heat the mirror gleamed, wood darkened, glass alive with a faint inner shimmer. She no longer resisted. Not really. Every night, she found herself sitting before it, knees tucked close, the lamplight dim, her whole world funneling down into that narrow frame. The whispers had grown stronger, fuller, almost melodic. They wove around her thoughts until she could not tell which belonged to her. "You're ready now," the voice told her. Her reflection leaned closer, features sharpening as though carved by something unseen. Sarah touched the glass again, and again it pulsed with warmth. "What am I ready for?" she whispered. The mirror seemed to deepen, as if the glass receded to reveal a long corridor of shadows, and from those shadows, a figure emerged. Not her reflection. Not this time. At first it was only a blur, the outline of a woman's face, pale against the dark. Her hair hung heavy, one side matted, her mouth a crooked line. The glass vibrated with a sound like breath drawn through clenched teeth. Sarah recoiled, pressing her back against the headboard. Who are you?" the voice answered. Lower now, heavier, resonant with grief. "They never listened to me. Not once. My screams were swallowed by these walls. My blood stained this floor. He thought it would end with me." Sarah's throat closed. The air felt thick with iron. The figure pressed closer to the glass, the dim light showing bruises that never healed, eyes that stared with terrible patience. "I lived here before you, and before you, another, and before her, another still. Always the same, always forgotten, until I learned how to stay." The whisper laced itself into Sarah's veins, filling her with tremors. "You carry the same silence I did," the spirit said. Swallowed words, broken bones no one sees. They made me a ghost. They will not make you one. Sarah shook her head violently. "No, I'm not like you. I didn't, he never." But her voice cracked. Memory surged. Daniel's anger, his hand slamming against the table, his shadow filling the hallway doorway. She had told herself it was just shouting, just words, that she left before it ever became worse. But the echo lived inside her. The mirror had known. The mirror had always known. The spirit's face pressed harder against the glass, flesh bending as if the barrier thinned. "He killed me here. And they forgot me. But I learned how to speak again. Through you, I can be heard." The air buzzed, like power lines above a deserted road. Sarah clutched her chest, heart a wild drum. "I don't want this," she whispered. The spirit's voice thickened, trembling with rage. "You already chose. The moment you touched me, you let me in." The days that followed blurred into fever. Sarah stopped going to work. Her phone died on the nightstand, untouched. Food rotted in the fridge. She lived only for the hours in front of the mirror, whispering back, whispering with, her own lips shaping words she could no longer tell apart from the voice. Neighbors began to notice. A woman from downstairs passed her in the hallway, frowning at the shadows beneath her eyes. A maintenance man knocked once, twice, asking if everything was all right. Sarah answered with silence. Behind her, in the reflection, the spirit smiled. At night, Sarah dreamed not of herself, but of the woman. She saw flashes of her life, a cramped kitchen, a man's angry silhouette, the sudden shatter of glass, the final blow. The dreams left Sarah shaking, drenched in sweat, the smell of iron lodged in her nostrils. "You see now," the spirit crooned. "You feel what I felt. Together, we are stronger." The climax came without warning. Sarah woke one night to a pounding on her door. Harsh, urgent, a voice shouting her name. Her mother. Sarah stumbled to her feet, dizzy, hair sticking to her damp forehead. She hadn't heard that voice in weeks. For a moment, relief broke through. Her mother was here, real, solid, but the mirror's glow pulled her back. "She never believed you," the spirit hissed. "Not when you cried, not when you begged. She turned away, just like mine did. She is not here for you. She is here for herself." The knocking grew louder. Her mother's voice cracked, pleading, "Sarah, please, open the door." Sarah pressed her palms to her ears. "Stop it. Stop, please." The reflection leaned forward, lips parting in a hungry smile. "Make her leave. Show her the silence you've carried." Sarah grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and hurled it toward the door. The bulb shattered, sparks fizzing out in a burst of shadow. Her mother cried out on the other side, pounding harder now, shouting her name. The spirit's laughter vibrated through the walls, high and thin. They never listened, but they will remember you. Every one of them, Sarah screamed, covering her eyes. She stumbled toward the mirror, desperate to end it, to break it, to do something, anything. Her fists crashed against the glass. Once, twice, but it did not crack. It pulsed under her skin like flesh, like muscle, unyielding. Her reflection's eyes locked with hers. Not the spirit's now hers, but twisted, smiling, hungry, and then the glass swallowed her hand. She gasped, jerking back, but it was too late. Her wrist sank into the surface as though into water, the cold biting, climbing up her arm. She clawed at the frame, wood splintering beneath her nails, but the pull was relentless. "Stay with me," the spirit murmured, voice filling her skull. "We are one. Together, we are never forgotten." Her shoulder vanished, her chest, her scream muffled as the glass rippled around her. The last thing she saw was her own face, staring back, calm now, serene, as if she had always belonged there. And then silence, the room empty, save for the faint glow of the mirror. When her mother finally forced the door open with the superintendent's help, the apartment was still, boxes half unpacked, food molding on the counter, and in the bedroom, a mirror, tall, narrow, framed in dark wood. Her mother swore, later, that for a second, just a second, she saw her daughter's eyes in the glass, wide and pleading, lips shaping a whisper she could not hear. But when she blinked, it was only her own reflection. The landlord had the mirror hauled away, of course. Left on the curb, it caught the gray light of morning. Passersby glanced at it, saw only themselves, and walked on. By afternoon, it was gone. And somewhere, in another apartment, another tenant would one day notice a faint whisper when the night grew too still. Story 2. The Doll of Sorrow. London in winter has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Fog drifts down narrow lanes like breath from an unseen giant, muffling sound, blurring lamplight into halos. Jack knew those streets by heart. He had walked them for decades. His little shop tucked between a shuttered tobacconist and a cafe that always smelled faintly of burnt milk. To most passers-by, his storefront was invisible, dusty glass, faded paint, a display of broken toys no child wanted. But those who still believed in mending the old rather than discarding it knew where to find him. Jack was a doll maker, or more precisely, a restorer of dolls. His hands had long ago grown stiff with age, the knuckles swollen, the nails ridged, yet they retained their delicacy when working with porcelain faces and fine threads. He spent his evenings under the dim light of a desk lamp, needle and glue, cotton and cloth, giving back a semblance of life to forgotten companions. He told himself it was work, but in truth, it was penance. His wife had once called his dolls silent children, and after she was gone, they were all he had left. It was on one of those fog-heavy nights that the man appeared. The bell above the shop door jangled weakly, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the thick hush of the fog. Jack looked up from his bench, expecting the usual, perhaps a grandmother carrying a ragged teddy, or a weary parent clutching a doll that had survived too many playgrounds. But this man was different. He was tall, though his shoulders slouched, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. His coat dripped with damp, leaving a trail across the wooden floor. He carried something wrapped in a cloth, dark stains blooming through the fabric. "Are you Mr. Hargreaves?" the man asked, voice low, polite, but carrying a tremor Jack couldn't place. Jack nodded slowly. "Aye. What is it you've brought me?" The man stepped forward, laying the bundle gently on the counter. "A doll, an old one. It needs care. I was told you could help." And Jack tugged the cloth aside, revealing porcelain eyes clouded with grime, lips cracked, hair matted with dust. The doll was unlike any he had seen. Slender, almost too human in proportion, its limbs bound in faded lace, its dress stained as though it had been buried in soil. He reached out, brushing the cheek with a fingertip. Cold, hard. He expected porcelain, but the surface gave slightly, like leather, left too long in the damp. "It's unusual," Jack murmured. The man's eyes glinted from beneath the brim of his hat. "Fix it, and when it is ready, you will give it to those who seek love. They will know where to find you." Jack frowned. Those who seek love? Yes. The man straightened, the fog behind him curling in through the open door. It brings comfort. You will see. Before Jack could ask more, the man tipped his hat, turned, and vanished into the night, leaving only the damp cloth and the doll resting between them. Jack stared at it for a long while. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to follow him as he carried it to the workbench. Something about the weight felt wrong. He had lifted thousands of dolls in his life, porcelain, cloth, resin, but this one sagged strangely in his arms, as though it were filled with something heavier than cotton. Still, habit overcame unease. He fetched his tools, the familiar ritual steadying his nerves. Brushes, thread, spare glass eyes, a pot of glue warming on the hob. He set the doll beneath the lamp. Shadows stretched across its features, deepening the cracks, making the faint curve of its lips look almost like a grimace. "All right then," Jack whispered, the way he always did when beginning a new repair. "Let's see what you're made of." The first stitch drew a sound, faint, so faint he thought at first it was the kettle groaning, or the whistle of wind against the window pane. But as his needle slid through the frayed seam of the doll's dress, he heard it again, soft, fragile, like a breath caught in a throat. A moan. Jack froze, needle trembling between his fingers. He glanced toward the door, the windows, the shadows on the shelves. Nothing. Only the dolls staring back at him from their perches, hollow-eyed, silent. He swallowed, forcing a laugh. Getting old, Hargreaves. Hearing things. He set the needle again. Thread pulled, fabric closed, and the doll sighed. The sound did not leave him. That sigh, if it was a sigh, lingered long after the needle left the fabric. Jack sat hunched over the bench, shoulders rigid, breath held as though waiting for it to return. The shop was silent, but for the ticking of the clock above the door, a steady heartbeat in the gloom. Yet beneath that rhythm, he thought he felt another, a faint pulse, softer than breath, emanating from the doll itself. Jack rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. "Nonsense," he muttered, his voice too loud in the cramped room. He told himself it was fatigue, that his ears had played a trick, that the kettle's whistle or the creak of the rafters had disguised themselves as something more sinister. But even as he spoke, his gaze slid back to the figure on the table. The doll lay where he had left it, half undressed, the tiny dress peeled back to reveal cracked seams along the torso. The lamp's light glimmered on its face, and for the first time Jack realized the eyes were not glass at all. They were duller, softer, ringed with tiny veins like cracks in marble. Porcelain didn't have veins. He should have stopped then. He should have wrapped the thing in cloth, locked it away, phoned the strange man who had delivered it, and told him to take it back. But the habits of a lifetime overruled the chill in his blood. Broken things were meant to be mended. That was his work, his ritual, the only reason he woke each day. So Jack threaded the needle again. The second seam ran along the arm. He pushed the needle through the cloth, tugged the thread tight, and there it was again. A sound. Clearer this time. A whimper. Jack's hands shook. The thread tangled, and he set the needle down quickly before he jabbed his own skin. He pressed both palms against the bench, leaning close. The doll was still, silent. He held his breath. Then, faint as the turning of a page, he heard it. "Please." Jack lurched back so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His heart pounded in his ears, and his eyes darted to the shelves, the windows, the door. No one. Nothing. Only the hundreds of other dolls lining the shop, their painted faces catching the lamplight. He stared at the thing on the table. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. You didn't speak." The doll's cracked lips parted, just slightly. Jack stumbled to his feet. His knees knocked against the bench, sending a pair of tools clattering to the floor. He turned toward the door, hand half raised, but the thought of stepping into the fog-heavy street, leaving the shop unguarded with that thing inside, froze him. For long minutes he stood there, the air thick and cold, until at last he crept back toward the bench. He lowered himself slowly, knees groaning, eyes fixed on the doll as though expecting it to spring to life. It did not move again. The next morning, Jack told himself he'd imagined it. He brewed strong tea, scalding his tongue with the first sip, determined to wash the memory away. He opened the shutters, letting pale London light seep into the shop, revealing dust motes drifting like ghosts through the air. Customers came and went, a young mother with a wooden toy horse, an elderly man carrying a clockwork bear. Jack mended each without thought, his hands working as they always had, the rhythm soothing. But every time he looked toward the back bench, his chest tightened. The doll lay beneath a cloth now, hidden from sight, but he swore he could feel it through the wood of the table, heavy, watching, waiting. That evening, after the last customer left, and the fog rolled back in from the Thames, Jack returned to it. He unwrapped the cloth slowly, fingers trembling. The doll's face emerged, pale and cracked, eyes cloudy with something that was not glass. He inhaled, steadying himself. "You're just an object," he told it, his voice thin. "You've no breath, no bones. I'll mend you, and you'll be whole again." But as he touched the seam along its side, the sound returned, not a sigh, not a whimper, a cry, faint, broken, as if from far away but unmistakable. A child's sob. Jack's heart thudded, his breath caught, yet he could not stop. He stitched, each pull of thread answered by another sound. A moan when he set the needle, a gasp when he tugged, a shuddering sigh when he tied the knot. By the time he finished, his face was damp with sweat, his hands trembling so badly the thread slipped from his grasp. And from the doll came a whisper, "Jack." He fell back into his chair, blood draining from his face. His name. It had spoken his name. "No," he muttered, clutching his temples. "No one's here. I'm alone. I'm alone." But the voice, thin, fragile, echoed again. "Jack." The lips did not move. The eyes did not blink. Yet the sound filled the room, seeping into the cracks in the floorboards, coiling around the shelves of silent toys. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. He thought of his wife, her laughter, her patience with his clutter, her gentle hand brushing sawdust from his sleeve. He thought of the years since she had gone, the empty chair by the fire, the endless quiet of the shop at night. Perhaps he was losing his mind. Perhaps this was what grief did after so many years. But when he opened his eyes again, the doll was staring at him, and in its cloudy pupils, he thought he saw something move. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at the workbench until dawn, tea growing cold at his elbow, the lamp buzzing faintly overhead. He dared not touch the doll again, but neither could he look away. From time to time, he thought he heard the faintest sounds. A sigh, a sob, a fragile whisper of words he couldn't quite catch. Each time his body stiffened, a shiver crawling his spine, yet he leaned closer, straining to listen. By morning, his eyes burned, and his hands ached from clenching. He rose stiffly, pulled the cloth back over the doll, and whispered, "Tomorrow. I'll finish tomorrow." But even as he said it, he knew the doll would not wait. That day passed in a blur. He served customers with shaking hands, forgetting change, fumbling with simple repairs. The young mother frowned at him. The elderly man muttered about poor workmanship. Jack hardly heard them. His mind was in the back room, with the covered figure that breathed in silence. And when dusk fell, he found himself drawn back again. The cloth slid away. The doll lay still. Jack touched its cracked torso with trembling fingers, and the sound returned instantly. A sob, longer this time, louder. "Help me." Jack froze. The voice was faint, almost drowned in static, like an old recording, but the words were clear. He leaned closer, heart hammering. "Who are you?" he whispered. The doll shuddered in his hands, a tremor so small he might have imagined it. "Cold," the voice breathed. "So cold." Jack pulled his hands back as though burned. He stared, wide-eyed, chest heaving. His workshop smelled suddenly of damp earth, metallic and raw, though no window was open. No soil lay near. The doll's eyes, cloudy and veined, caught the lamplight, and for the first time Jack realized they were not eyes at all. They were fragments of something once alive. Jack had repaired thousands of dolls in his lifetime. Some were simple porcelain heads reattached, joints restrung, fabric patched where time had chewed holes. Others were delicate, requiring weeks of patience, steady hands, and careful study. But never, in all his years, had he approached one with dread. Until now, the doll lay on the bench beneath the lamp, its cracked face luminous in the golden glow. Beneath the cloth, its body was heavy, strangely pliant, the limbs resisting his grip, as though muscle clung beneath the surface. Jack's tools, neatly arranged, glinted in the light. Tiny screwdrivers, scissors, needles. They looked suddenly surgical, instruments for an operation he was not trained to perform. The voice had been silent since dawn, but silence itself felt like pressure waiting, coiling, urging him forward. He lit a second lamp, flooding the bench with harsher light. His hands trembled as he fetched a scalpel, one he rarely used except for trimming fine edges of fabric. Just material, he whispered to himself. Just stuffing, nothing more. You'll see, just stuffing. The first incision was small, a slice along the seam of the torso. The fabric parted reluctantly, and Jack expected cotton, wool, perhaps sawdust. What he saw instead was gray, damp, strands that clung together like sinew. The smell struck him before the sight fully registered a copper tang, faint but undeniable, like old coins rubbed between fingers or rusted nails left in rain. His stomach lurched. He leaned back, pressing his sleeve to his nose, but the odor seeped through, heavy and metallic. The doll sighed, long, shuddering. Jack froze. His hand still gripped the scalpel, poised above the opening, but his body would not move. His pulse thundered in his ears. The sound came again. A whisper now, threaded with anguish. Don't leave me. Jack's breath came ragged. No, he whispered, voice cracking. You're not real. You're not. But his hand disobeyed him. Almost as though guided, it slid the scalpel deeper, widening the seam. What spilled forth was not cotton. It was hair. Long strands, tangled, clumped, gray-brown in the lamplight. Human hair. Jack recoiled, chair skidding back across the wooden floor. His chest seized with revulsion, but his gaze clung to the figure on the bench. The hair twined from the opening like roots seeking light, curling against the table's surface. He swallowed bile, gripping the edge of the bench until his knuckles whitened. God help me. The doll's lips parted. Colder now. It moaned. Jack staggered toward the door, fumbling for the latch, but stopped. Outside was only fog, endless London fog, and the image of the man who had brought the doll returned to him. The brim of his hat, the gleam of his eyes, the way he had vanished into mist. If Jack abandoned the thing now, what would become of it? Would it end up in another home, in another child's hands? He could not allow that. Whatever horror was stitched into this figure, he had to understand it. He had to undo it. With shaking hands, he returned to the bench. He fetched a pair of scissors, slid them carefully along the seam, peeling the fabric open further. The body gaped, revealing more hair, strands slick with a resinous substance, matted together. Beneath, something pale gleamed. Bone. Jack's throat closed, the tiny curve of a rib. Not porcelain, not plastic real. Fragile, but real. The doll whimpered, the sound thin as breath through cracked lips. Finish what you started. Jack's body rebelled. His skin crawled, his mouth dry as dust, but he could not stop. Piece by piece, seam by seam, he opened the figure, each cut unveiling another fragment of something that should never have been contained within cloth and lace. Small bones, bits of cartilage hardened into brittle edges, tendons shriveled into threads, all packed tightly together, bound by stitches too fine for any factory machine. Every slice of the scissors was answered by a cry, sometimes a child's sob, sometimes the groan of an old wound reopened. The sounds filled the workshop, drowning the steady tick of the clock, pressing against Jack's skull until he swayed with dizziness. He whispered through clenched teeth, "What are you?" The doll's voice came low, trembling. "Made of sorrow. Made of me." Jack reeled. His mind skittered between disbelief and horror. Had he gone mad, conjuring voices from grief and age? Or was this thing truly a vessel, stitched from human remains, stuffed with the silence of the dead? He forced himself to lean closer. The face loomed under the lamp, cracks deepening around the eyes. He touched the cheek with the back of his finger, trembling. It was not porcelain at all. It yielded faintly, as though beneath the hardened surface lay something once soft, once living. The whisper came again, closer now, almost inside his ear. He made me. He buried me in lace. He gave me away. Jack's stomach clenched. His mind raced back to the man in the coat, the bundle damp with stains, the words he had spoken. Give it to those who seek love. Love, twisted into this. flesh and bone disguised as comfort. Jack stumbled back from the bench, pressing himself against the shelves. Dozens of dolls stared down at him, their painted faces frozen in eternal smiles. For the first time, they looked like witnesses, an audience for his unraveling. The doll on the bench writhed faintly, the seams splitting wider as though eager to reveal more. A hand, stitched crudely from pale fragments, slid free from the sleeve. The fingers were jointed, not porcelain, not wood, but bone-bound in thread. Jack gagged, bile burning his throat. He covered his mouth, tears stinging his eyes. "No," he whispered. "This isn't real. This isn't..." But the hand twitched, and the voice rose, no longer faint, but strong enough to shake the air. "Don't leave me broken, Jack. Don't leave me half-made." His mind split. Half of him screamed to destroy it, to douse it in fire, to shatter it into ash. The other half, the craftsman's half, recoiled at the thought. He had spent a lifetime mending what others discarded. He had promised to restore, to make whole. Even now, faced with this horror, his hands itched to finish the work. Trembling, he picked up the scissors again. The doll groaned, a sound of relief, as though its bones had loosened in gratitude. Jack's vision blurred with tears, his breath ragged, but he cut, peeled, revealed more fragments, more proof of the unthinkable. A child's jawbone, smooth with age, a shard of a femur, etched faintly with what looked like a name scratched in desperation. Each piece carried a weight, not just of flesh, but of memory. The air grew thick with grief, with voices whispering over one another, cries, prayers, gasps all spilling from the doll as though its seams could no longer contain them. Jack clutched his head, trembling violently, his shop filled with sorrow, an ocean of sound pressing him toward the floor. Through it all, one voice rose above the rest. "You see me now. You know what I am. Finish me, Jack, or join me." Jack collapsed to his knees. The scissors clattered to the floor. His breath came in sobs, his chest heaving. In the silence that followed, the doll lay open on the bench. Its body split to reveal a grotesque mosaic of human remnants. Yet its face, its cracked, clouded face, looked almost peaceful, as though waiting for a final stitch. Jack crawled forward, tears streaking his face. His hands hovered above the fragments, uncertain, trembling. The craftsman's instinct warred with his terror. And then, as though to seal his fate, the doll whispered once more, "Don't you want her back? Don't you miss her hands, her voice, her warmth? Stitch me, Jack, and I will give her to you." The sound of his wife's laughter rang faintly in his ears. The smell of her perfume, the softness of her touch. Memory surged so vividly that for a moment, he believed. He reached for the needle. The needle trembled in Jack's hand. It was the same one he had used for decades, its wooden handle worn smooth by time, its steel shaft dulled by countless seams. Yet in that moment it felt foreign, heavy, as though it belonged not to him but to the thing sprawled open on the bench. The doll waited, body split wide, hair spilling like weeds from a grave, bones glimmering faintly in the lamplight. The room seemed to lean toward it, every shelf, every doll, every shadow pressed in, urging him forward. "Stitch me," the voice coaxed, softer now, honeyed, wrapping around his grief like silk around a blade. "You've mended so many forgotten things. Mend me, and I will mend you." Jack's throat constricted. His wife's absence had been a wound that never closed. Empty chair, empty bed, empty years. The promise of hearing her again, feeling her hand in his, made his chest ache with a longing so sharp it almost became hope. He lowered the needle. The first stitch sank through flesh like fabric, tugging fragments together. The doll sighed, not with sorrow this time, but with relief. A long, low breath that filled the room, vibrating through the floorboards. Jack froze, needle halfway through, but the voice urged him on. "Yes, that's it. Each stitch brings me closer. Each stitch brings her closer." Jack's hand shook violently. He blinked through tears. I don't want to hurt anyone." The doll's cracked lips seemed to curl. "You're not hurting. You're healing." As he worked, the air grew thicker. The lamplight dimmed as if smoke had seeped into the glass. The shadows of other dolls on the shelves lengthened, their painted smiles warped, as though they too whispered approval. Each time the needle bit, Jack heard another sound, A sob fading, a prayer answered, a fragment of laughter so like his wife's it tore him open inside. "Do you hear them?" the doll asked. "Yes," Jack whispered hoarsely. "They are grateful. They are whole because of you. You give them back their voices." Jack's hand steadied. For the first time in years, purpose filled him. The rhythm of stitching returned, old and familiar, the craftsman's dance. But beneath it lurked something darker, because with every seam he closed, the doll grew heavier and warmer. When he paused, wiping sweat from his brow, the doll shifted. Not much, just a twitch of fingers, a faint tilt of the head, but enough to drain the blood from his face. Its voice had changed too, no longer a thin moan or sigh. Richer now, fuller, more, it commanded. "You must finish me." Jack dropped the needle, stumbling back. No, I've done enough. You've barely begun." The voice thundered through the room, rattling the jars on the shelves. "You cannot stop halfway. Would you abandon a child half-born? Would you leave her body torn open?" The words drove nails into Jack's conscience. He clutched his chest, gasping. "What are you?" The doll laughed. A brittle, broken sound, like bones striking stone. "I am what he made. Flesh and sorrow, bound in lace. But I can be more. With your hands I can live again. With your grief, I can walk again." The image of the man in the hat burned in Jack's mind. He had not delivered a doll. He had delivered a curse. Jack staggered toward the fireplace. His hands fumbled for matches. "I'll burn you," he rasped. "I'll end this." The doll shrieked, not with fear, but fury. The cry pierced his skull, dropping him to his knees. His vision swam. Every doll on the shelf seemed to wail in unison, a chorus of pain that froze him where he knelt. "Burn me," the voice hissed. "And you burn her too." The smell of his wife's perfume drifted through the air. The faint brush of her hand ghosted his cheek. Jack choked on a sob. "You lie," he whispered. "Do I? Or do you finally remember the promise you made to never let her go?" The fire went unlit. Jack crawled back to the bench, trembling, broken, desperate. His tears fell onto the fragments of bone, darkening them. His needle slipped through shaking fingers, yet still he stitched. The doll grew stronger. Its limbs jerked faintly, the fingers curling, the torso rising and falling, as though lungs had reformed within. Each movement sickened Jack, but each one fed his hope. "You're close," it crooned. "One more night, one more offering." Jack blinked, dazzled. "Offering?" The doll's voice lowered to a purr. "Thread alone cannot bind me. I need blood. Fresh. Yours will do." The craftsman's instinct warred with terror. He stared at his hand, the needle trembling above his skin. Could a single drop bring her back? Could pain be the price of resurrection? His wife's face shimmered in memory. Her laugh, the warmth of her hand on his. Jack pressed the needle into his thumb. A bead of blood welled up, bright under the lamplight. The doll shuddered violently, as though electrified. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, its chest convulsing. Jack stumbled back, but the voice roared with triumph. "Yes, more. Give me more. Stitch me with sorrow and seal me with blood." Jack pressed his wounded hand to his chest, breath ragged. He realized then the truth. This was no repair. It was a binding. Each stitch did not heal, but tethered. Each drop of blood did not restore, but enslaved. And yet, his heart ached with longing so deep he could hardly breathe. The doll twisted on the bench, its limbs jerking, its head tilting toward him, its cloudy eyes locked onto his, and for an instant, he saw her, his wife, smiling, alive. "Jack," she whispered, her voice no longer broken, but clear, beautiful. He fell to his knees, sobbing. His hands reached toward the figure, shaking, desperate, and in that moment, he did not know if he reached for salvation or for ruin. The shop no longer smelled of dust and varnish. It smelled of iron. It smelled of the damp earth of a grave disturbed, of threads soaked in grief. Jack's hands ached. The skin of his fingertips was raw, pricked and dotted with blood, but he stitched on, guided not by will but by the rhythm the doll demanded. He had sewn through the night, hunched under the flicker of the lamp, and as dawn leaked pale through the shutters, the figure before him no longer looked like a doll at all. The seams were closed, the cracks filled, the fragments bound together in something whole. The face, once split and cloudy, gleamed with a terrible clarity. Not porcelain, not resin. Flesh, stretched taut and pale. The eyes blinked once. Slowly, Jack dropped the needle. The doll inhaled, a shallow, ragged breath, and then it smiled. Jack staggered back, hand clutching his chest. His knees buckled against the bench. God, what have I done? The voice that answered was not a whisper this time. It was a chorus layered, trembling, voices overlapping like a choir stitched from pain. Men, women, children, each syllable scraped raw, yet together they formed words. You made us whole. Jack shook his head, tears burning his eyes. No, no, I mended what should never. You gave us life again. The doll breathed. Its smile widened. And for that, we will give you what you crave. The air shimmered. For a moment, the doll's face blurred, and in its place, her, his wife, whole, smiling, as she had on their wedding day, sunlight gilding her hair. Jack's heart clenched. He reached forward, sobbing, Anna, but the image flickered. The smile warped. The face collapsed into another, then another. A child's scream, an old woman's stare. A dozen faces, flashing, shifting, spilling over one another like reflections on water. Jack stumbled back. His stomach turned to ice. No stop. The doll's voice thundered, rattling the glass panes of the shop. You cannot unmake what you have bound. The bell above the shop door chimed. Jack froze. He turned. The man had returned. The one with the hat, the dripping coat. The same faint smell of damp earth followed him in, curling around his boots. His eyes gleamed as they fell on the bench. You finished it, he said softly. Good. Jack's voice cracked. What is this? What have you made me do? The man's smile was small, polite. What you've always done. You mend the broken. He stepped closer, gaze fixed on the doll, whose chest now rose and fell with shallow breaths. And I break them. Jack's blood chilled. You kill them, he whispered. The man tipped his hat. Kill. Number collect. I collect what others waste. A lonely heart, a broken body, a silence no one hears. And you, Mr. Hargreaves, you, give my collection form. Jack's breath came in gasps. His knees weakened. Number, I won't. I won't do this. The man's eyes gleamed sharper. You already have. The doll sat upright, slowly, unnaturally, bones creaking beneath its dress. Its head turned toward Jack, cloudy eyes now bright with borrowed life. Jack, it whispered, his wife's voice again, sweet, soft, calling him home. Jack collapsed to the floor, clutching his head. Leave me alone, please. Leave me alone. The man crouched beside him, voice smooth. Do you know why I chose you? Because you were already half mine. You lived with ghosts. You spoke to them in silence. You stitched your grief into every doll. I simply gave you one that spoke back. Jack sobbed, rocking. His hands were stained with blood and resin, his tools glistening with fragments of something no craft should touch. He felt the weight of guilt pressing into his spine. The doll's steps creaked across the floor, fragile but steady. It leaned down, its hand bone bound in thread brushing his cheek. Stay with me, it murmured. Stay, and you'll never be alone again. Jack screamed, a raw, breaking sound. He seized the scissors, drove them into the doll's chest. The shop erupted. The doll shrieked, 1,000 voices at once, walls shuddering with the sound. Light burst from the seam, blinding, searing his eyes. Jack staggered back, choking on smoke, on the stench of burning flesh and hair. He stumbled against shelves, dolls tumbling around him, painted faces cracking on the floor. Through the storm of sound, one voice cut clear, his wife's. You promised me. Jack fell to his knees, arms over his head, sobbing. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The light dimmed. The voices faded. The shop fell silent. When he dared to lift his head, the bench was empty. The doll was gone. Only the man remained, standing in the doorway. His hat brim shadowed his face, but Jack could see the curve of his smile. You cannot destroy what is already yours, the man said. She will return. They always do. Then he stepped into the fog and vanished. Jack never left the shop again. Days passed, weeks perhaps. The shutters remained closed, the lamps burning low. He worked without customers now, without rest, his hands raw, stitching dolls that no one asked for. Each night, he heard the whispers return soft at first, then louder, until the shelves themselves seemed to breathe. The doll of sorrow had vanished, but its voice lingered, and Jack, broken by grief, no longer knew if he was mending it or if it was mending him. Story 3. Eternal Service. Coastal towns in winter always carry a hush about them. In the off-season, the boardwalk feels deserted, the souvenir shops shuttered, the gulls wheeling overhead like restless sentinels. The ocean itself seems quieter, its waves breaking not in triumph but in whispers, as if it too remembers the lives it has swallowed. Emily liked it that way. She had moved to Beaufort, North Carolina, for the quiet, a place where she could rent a small apartment above a bait shop, where the smell of brine and salt clung to her curtains, and where she could walk to the pier in less than 5 minutes and pretend, for a while, that she had escaped herself. Her 30th birthday had passed with little more than a cupcake from the bakery on Turner Street and a text from her mother. Friends, lovers, ambitions, those had all eroded over time, worn away like shells underfoot. She didn't mind the solitude, or so she told herself, but at night, in the dim bathroom mirror, she touched the corners of her eyes, the faint lines creeping there, and wondered what she was really running from. It was on one of those gray afternoons, the kind where the horizon blurred into sea mist, that she stepped into the shop. She hadn't noticed it before. Wedged between a consignment store and a shuttered seafood joint, the window bore no sign, only a hand-painted word, fading in sea air. Apothecary. Inside, the light was soft, amber from lamps with paper shades. Shelves sagged under glass bottles, jars filled with herbs, soaps wrapped in twine. The air smelled faintly of lavender, faintly of something metallic, like rainwater on copper. A woman stood behind the counter, older than Emily, though not by much, perhaps mid-40s, with hair dark as wet kelp and eyes a green too vivid to be natural. She smiled when Emily entered, a slow, knowing smile that felt like recognition though they had never met. "You've come at last," the woman said. Emily blinked. "Sorry?" The woman reached beneath the counter and drew out a small jar. The glass was frosted, the cream inside pale, glimmering faintly under the lamplight. She slid it forward across the wood. "For you," Emily frowned. "I didn't order anything. It's not for sale." The woman's voice was low, melodic, like the roll of the tide. "It's for you. You've been waiting for it, haven't you? The little miracle." Emily hesitated. The jar was cool beneath her fingers when she picked it up, heavier than she expected, as though filled with more than simple lotion. "I don't understand," she said. "You will." The woman's green eyes fixed on hers, unblinking. "A service such as this doesn't cost money, only devotion." Before Emily could ask what that meant, the woman smiled again, a curve of lips that was both kind and sharp. "Use it tonight, just once. You'll see." That night, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, the jar balanced in her hands. The apartment was quiet save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant crash of waves. She unscrewed the lid. The scent drifted out sweet, floral, but undercut with something else, something she couldn't place. The texture gleamed like pearl, smooth and luminous. She dipped her fingers in. The cream was cool, almost too cool, and when she spread it across her cheek, she shivered. The sensation was unlike any lotion she had ever used. It seemed to sink into her skin instantly, leaving no residue, only a faint hum beneath the surface. She leaned toward the mirror. Her reflection blinked back at her, but her skin glowed, not oily, not artificial, but luminous, as though lit from within. Emily laughed softly, disbelieving. She touched her face again, tracing the cheekbone. It felt firmer, smoother, younger. For the first time in years, she didn't turn away from the mirror. When she lay down, she expected restless sleep, but instead she drifted into dreams that felt more like memories, voices she didn't recognize murmuring in the background, a chorus too faint to understand. She woke before dawn with her heart beating strangely, her skin still cool to the touch. She went to the bathroom mirror, switched on the light. Her face gleamed, not only smoother, but radiant, as though the lamp's glow loved her more than before. For a long time she stared, smiling despite herself, and yet, in the silence of the apartment, she thought she heard something else. A whisper, Not from the street, not from the sea, from beneath her skin. Emily had never received so many compliments in her life. It began the very next morning. At the cafe by the pier, the barista who usually handed her coffee without a glance stopped mid-motion, blinking at her. "You look radiant today," he said, almost embarrassed by the words. Emily laughed it off, but when she stepped into the restroom a few minutes later, she saw what he meant. The overhead light, harsh and fluorescent, usually revealed every flaw, yet her skin glowed with a softness that even the cruel mirror could not distort. The faint lines were gone, her cheeks smooth, her eyes brighter. It was as though she had stepped out of some hushed dream and carried its light with her. She touched her face with tentative fingers, half expecting the illusion to shatter. But no, it was real. The cream had done this, and so that night she used it again. The jar was heavier now. She could swear the cream shifted inside it like something alive, adjusting its weight in her palm. When she dipped her fingers, the texture clung longer, colder. She spread it across her cheeks, her forehead, her neck. The shiver that ran through her wasn't unpleasant. It was invigorating. The cold hummed beneath her skin, spreading like frost across glass. She leaned toward the mirror, breath fogging faintly, though the bathroom was not cold. Her reflection smiled back, luminous, perfect. The following days unfurled in a haze of attention she hadn't known she craved. A neighbor who had barely spoken more than a hello paused on the stairs to compliment her hair, though she hadn't changed a thing. A stranger on the boardwalk asked if she was a model. Even her mother's voice on the phone softened, puzzled but warm. "You sound happy, Emily." Different. Emily should have felt flattered. Instead, she felt uneasy. Because each time someone came too close, the barista leaning over the counter, her neighbor brushing past her on the stairwell, she felt it. A chill, not in the air, but in herself. A cold that radiated from her skin outward, sharp enough to make her draw back. She tried to hide it, wrapping scarves tighter, keeping her sleeves long, but it was no use. The cold wasn't from without, it was from within. And then came the voices. At first they were faint, a hiss like seashell echoes when she pressed her hands to her face. She thought it was her imagination, a trick of fatigue. But the second week, the murmurs grew distinct. Whispers threaded between her thoughts as she walked down Turner Street, as she washed dishes, as she lay awake at night. They weren't her own voice. They weren't anyone she knew. "She took my hands. He buried me where the tide reaches twice a day. Don't forget me. Please don't let them forget me." Emily froze each time, clutching at her temples. Yet the voices did not stop. They seeped in and out, like the tide itself, retreating only to return stronger. She found herself standing before the jar, heart racing. The cream glowed faintly now, a phosphorescent sheen under the lamplight, as if lit from within. She wanted to throw it away, but when she tried, her hands trembled too violently to hold it steady. And in the back of her skull, the whispers coaxed, "Don't waste us. Use us. Shine." By the third week, sleep became difficult. The dreams were too vivid. She walked through corridors of mirrors where every reflection was her face, yet each bore different scars, burns, bruises. They whispered in unison, voices overlapping until she woke gasping, her sheets damp with sweat. In daylight, her beauty only deepened. Her skin gleamed with unnatural vitality. She looked younger, healthier, more alive than ever. But those closest to her, her mother on FaceTime, her coworker at the library, would suddenly shiver mid-conversation. "Are you cold?" they'd ask, rubbing their arms, glancing around the room. The thermostat would read 70. The windows would be closed. Only Emily sat there, radiant and shivering, her breath fogging faintly between words. She learned to smile, to brush it off. But inside, dread gnawed, because she knew it wasn't the room that chilled them. It was her. One evening, after too many nights of restless whispers, Emily resolved to stop. She unscrewed the lid, intending to wash the cream down the drain. But the moment she caught sight of the luminous substance inside, the voices surged. "Don't abandon us. We live in you now. Without us, you are nothing." Her hands shook. The cream pulsed faintly, almost as if breathing. She thought of her reflection, the radiant face, the sudden attention, the softening of her mother's tone. The part of her that had once hated the mirror could not let go. Her fingers dipped once more. The cold spread instantly, deeper this time, as if seeping into bone. She shivered violently, clutching the sink, teeth chattering, and then she heard it clearly, clearer than ever before. A single voice, cutting through the chorus. "You wear my skin." Emily stared at her reflection. Her own eyes blinked back at her, but behind them, faintly, she swore she saw another pair. The whispers no longer hid in the corners of her mind. They were everywhere now. When Emily walked the pier at dawn, their voices rose with the gulls, threaded through the slap of waves against pylons. When she poured coffee, their murmurs drifted up with the steam, faint lips forming words in the curl of vapor. Even in the library, amid the hush of books and the quiet shuffle of patrons, they pressed close, brushing her ear as though leaning in from just beyond sight. She could no longer tell where her thoughts ended, and theirs began. One evening, she locked herself in the bathroom and forced herself to listen. She sat on the edge of the tub, jar on her lap, hands clutching it so tightly her knuckles blanched. "Who are you?" she whispered. The mirror showed her face, flawless, radiant, ageless, but her lips had not moved when the reply came. "I was buried in the dunes, sand in my mouth, salt in my lungs." Her pulse surged. She clutched the jar tighter. "No," another voice overlapped, ragged and thin. "They sank me where the marsh swallows everything." I screamed, but no one came. Her skin prickled. She pressed both hands to her ears, but the voices did not fade. They came from within, vibrating in her bones. Then a third voice, softer, younger. She ground my bones fine, mixed me into the cream, said beauty must have sacrifice. Emily's breath hitched, her stomach lurching. She shoved the jar into the sink, twisting the faucet, but the cream resisted the water. The droplets slid off its surface like oil. Even as it pooled, the whispers hissed up through the steam. "Don't waste us. We live in you now." That night, she dreamed of the apothecary. The shelves loomed taller, sagging with jars that pulsed faintly, as though filled with living hearts. The woman behind the counter smiled with those green, unblinking eyes. "You wanted radiance," she said, her voice echoing like the tide. "But radiance comes from life, and life must come from somewhere." Emily stumbled back, her reflection gleaming in every jar. Faces floated in the glass. Men, women, children, eyes hollow, mouths moving in silent pleas. When she woke, sweat soaked her sheets, but her skin glowed more beautifully than ever. She stopped answering her phone. Her mother left messages that grew increasingly frantic. Friends from her old city sent texts. "Are you okay? Haven't seen you online in weeks." Emily stared at the screen, her reflection gleaming faintly in the black glass, and felt the chill seep deeper into her marrow. It wasn't just physical cold anymore. It was distance. Each time someone reached for her, whether her neighbor offering to help with groceries or a child brushing past in the library, she felt a widening gulf, a barrier, and yet the voices pressed closer. "We are yours now. You carry us. You cannot set us down. Your glow is our glow." Emily wept into her pillow, shivering, but when morning came, she still reached for the jar. The more she used it, the more she noticed changes beneath the beauty. Her skin was flawless, yes, but when she touched it, the surface felt too smooth, not like flesh at all, more like polished stone, cool even under blankets. She pressed her cheek against her palm, desperate for warmth, and felt nothing. One evening, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she caught movement beneath her reflection. Not her face, but another faint, layered under her skin. A young man's hollow eyes staring from her cheek, a woman's cracked lips curving across her forehead. For an instant, dozens of faces shimmered across her surface, all begging, all pleading. Emily screamed, stumbling back, but when she blinked, the vision was gone. Her reflection smiled, perfect, untouched, but she knew better. Desperate, Emily returned to the apothecary. The fog was thick, sea air heavy with brine, but when she reached the street, the shop was gone. The consignment store stood as it always had. The seafood joint boarded shut, but the painted word apothecary had vanished, leaving only bare brick. She staggered up and down the block, panic rising. "Where are you?" she cried into the mist. "What did you give me?" No answer came but the hiss of waves and the faint murmur of the voices. laughing inside her head. In the days that followed, she tried everything, scrubbing her skin raw with soap until it burned red, slathering herself in oils, vinegar, anything that might wash it away, but the glow remained. Her skin only gleamed brighter, as though fed by her desperation. The voices grew crueler. You took us willingly. You begged for beauty. Now we live in you. There is no undoing, only devotion. At night, she dreamed of the woman again. Those green eyes gleaming in the dim shop, smile sharp as broken glass. You asked for service eternal, the woman whispered, and eternal you shall have. Emily stopped going out. She closed her curtains, shut herself in the dim apartment above the bait shop, hiding from eyes that might notice the glow she could no longer conceal. But she could not hide from the whispers. They filled every corner, every silence. She felt them in the cool of her sheets, the chill of her breath, the shimmer beneath her skin. And sometimes, when the night was quiet enough, she swore she heard them moving. Not only inside her head, but inside her body, beneath her flesh, beneath her perfect skin. We are with you, Emily. We are, forever. The jar had become an altar. Emily kept it on the bathroom sink, though she had tried a dozen times to throw it away. Each attempt failed in some inexplicable fashion. The first night she carried it to the dumpster. Her hands froze at the edge of the bin, fingers refusing to let go. The second night she hurled it into the sea. Watching the tide pull it under, yet by dawn it sat once more on the sink, dry, clean, as though it had never left. By the third night she understood. The jar would not leave her. The devotion had already begun. She avoided mirrors, but they found her anyway. The dark face of the microwave, the blank screen of her phone, the window panes at night, each caught her glow, each whispered back at her, and in every reflection for just a moment the surface rippled, as though someone else pressed against the glass from the other side. She pulled blankets around her shoulders, trembling in the humid coastal air. No matter how tightly she wrapped herself, her body stayed cold. Ice had settled into her bones, spreading outward until every breath came out in a faint mist. Her skin, though, was flawless, luminous. Passers-by on the street paused, stared, sometimes even smiled without realizing why. She felt their eyes drink her in like thirsty travelers finding water. She hated them for it, because she knew what they were really seeing. The voices no longer murmured. They demanded, use us, feed us, serve us. Emily clutched her head, pacing the length of the small apartment. No, I won't. You can't make me. But even as she spoke, her hands itched. The jar gleamed faintly in the bathroom, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. She felt it calling to her through the walls, tugging at her muscles, guiding her feet toward it. Her chest heaved. She slammed her body against the doorframe, holding herself back, trembling with the effort. Her own skin prickled with heat, no, with cold radiating outward until frost formed faintly along the mirror. The whispers pressed harder, overlapping into a single chorus that shook her skull. Without us, you are nothing. Without us, you fade. She tried again to wash it off. Scalding water, harsh soap until her skin blistered. She clawed at her arms until her nails drew blood, but each mark vanished within seconds, healed by the unnatural glow. Her reflection only smiled, flawless as ever. The laughter began then, not her own. A dozen voices rising from beneath her skin, echoing in her bones, cold and triumphant. You cannot shed us, they hissed. We are the price of beauty. We are the eternal service you begged for. Emily collapsed onto the bathroom floor, sobbing. I never asked for this. The jar pulsed. A thin crack spread along its frosted glass, and from within she swore she saw shapes, shifting faces pressed against the inner surface, mouths open in silent cries. You did, they whispered together. Every time you hated yourself, every time you prayed for youth, for radiance, for another chance, you called us, and we answered. She began to dream not only at night, but in waking hours. The voices painted visions across her sight. She saw women buried in marshland, their hands clawing upward before the tide swallowed them. Men drowned in seawater, their bodies broken and ground into powder. Children with hollow eyes, their hair cut away, mixed into the cream like herbs in a potion. Each vision ended the same way. Their skin peeled from them, luminous even in death, gathered into jars. And always the woman with the kelp-dark hair and green eyes stood watching, You serve me now, the woman said, as they served me, as others will. Eternal service, eternal glow. Emily woke from these visions with her throat raw from screaming, her sheets soaked in salt sweat, but her skin always. Her skin shone brighter, as if fed by her fear. Her mother came once, driving down from Raleigh. Emily refused to open the door. "Sweetheart, please." Her mother begged from the hall. "I don't know what's happening, but I can hear you crying. Let me in." Emily crouched on the other side, back pressed to the door, arms wrapped around herself. The air around her mother was warm, alive. She could feel it, radiating through the wood. And in contrast, her own body seemed to sink deeper into ice. She wanted to answer, to fling the door open and bury herself in her mother's arms. But the voices hissed in her skull. "If she touches you, she will see. If she sees, she will know. If she knows, she will take us from you." Emily pressed her hands over her mouth, sobbing silently. Her mother knocked until her knuckles bled, then finally left. When the footsteps faded, the voices coiled lovingly around her spine. "Good girl. Ours alone. Forever." The days blurred. Emily no longer ate much. Food tasted of dust, heavy and bitter. Water did nothing for her thirst. The only relief came when she unscrewed the jar, dipped trembling fingers inside, and spread the cold cream across her skin. Each time, the glow deepened. Each time, the voices grew louder, closer. One night, she leaned toward the mirror after applying it, and for the first time her reflection did not mimic her. It leaned closer, eyes dark with hunger, lips curving into a smile that wasn't hers. "You are almost ready," it whispered. Emily's stomach nodded. "Ready for what?" The reflection's smile widened. "To join us." She tried one last desperate act. She carried the jar to the pier, the sea roaring beneath. She hurled it with all her strength into the black water. It sank without a splash, swallowed instantly. Her chest eased. For the first time in weeks, the whispers fell silent. She collapsed against the rail, sobbing, staring at the waves. But when she returned home, the jar sat waiting on the sink, uncracked, untouched. The voices filled her skull again, louder than ever. "You cannot escape devotion. Service is eternal." Her knees buckled. She fell to the bathroom floor, clutching her head as laughter filled the room. Her reflection gleamed down at her, flawless, monstrous, and beneath her radiant skin, dozens of souls shifted, pressing against her from within, waiting for their turn to speak. Emily had stopped measuring time. The days bled together, indistinguishable in the dim glow of her apartment. Curtains drawn, clocks unwound, phone silenced. She existed only in fragments now, moments between applications of the cream, moments when she tried and failed to resist, moments when the voices claimed her entirely. Her skin gleamed like marble lit from within, a radiance that seemed to pulse faintly in the dark. Sometimes she caught it reflected on the ceiling at night, faint halos shimmering as though her body had become a lamp. She hated it, and she loved it. The contradiction tore her apart. She tried fire next. One night she filled the sink with rubbing alcohol, poured the cream in, and struck a match. Blue flames leapt up, licking the air, filling the room with bitter fumes. Emily stumbled back, coughing, tears streaking her glowing cheeks. For a moment the voices screamed, a chorus of agony that made her ears bleed. Her knees buckled. She pressed her palms to the tile, gasping. Convinced she had done it, she had ended them. But when the flames guttered out, the jar was whole again, sitting upright on the counter, its frosted glass cool to the touch. The cream inside shimmered brighter than before, and the voices returned, louder. "Foolish child, you cannot burn devotion." She collapsed to the floor, sobbing, rocking herself against the cold porcelain. Her reflection in the mirror above her tilted its head, watching with pity. Or was it amusement? "You are ours," it whispered, "forever." The cold deepened. By the second month, Emily could no longer feel warmth at all. The shower scalded her skin raw, yet she shivered as though drenched in ice water. Blankets piled on her bed failed to raise her temperature. When she walked to the window and pressed her hand to the glass, condensation formed on the outside, frost tracing delicate veins like lace. Her neighbors began to notice. "Are you all right?" they asked when she descended the stairs, her breath fogging even in summer air. They commented on her glow, You've never looked better, but their smiles faltered when they stepped too near, their bodies instinctively recoiling from the unnatural chill. Emily learned to keep distance, to stay in shadows, to avoid the warmth of living flesh, for fear it might reveal the truth. The voices filled every silence. They no longer whispered, no longer pleaded. They instructed, wear us each night, do not deny us, carry us to the world so others may see. Sometimes, in moments of clarity, Emily argued, you're dead, you don't belong here, why me? The answer always came in unison. Because you asked, because you longed, because beauty without sacrifice does not exist. You became our vessel the moment you touched the jar. She pressed her hands over her ears until they ached, but the voices pulsed in her skull, vibrating through her bones. And still, each night, she unscrewed the lid. Her fingers dipped, trembling, and spread the cold radiance across her skin. One evening, she dreamed or thought she dreamed of the apothecary again. The shop was darker this time, shelves groaning with jars that glowed faintly in the gloom. Each jar contained not cream but faces, pressed against the glass, mouths moving in silent pleas. The woman stood behind the counter, green eyes sharp as shards. You see now, she said, her voice like surf breaking against rocks. Every jar is a service. Every glow is a devotion. And you are my most devoted yet. Emily clutched the jar in her hands, her heart breaking. Take it back, please. I don't want it anymore. The woman leaned closer, her smile widening until it seemed to slice her face in two. You cannot return what has already taken root. You are no longer Emily. You are we. You are all of us. Emily woke screaming, her throat raw, her sheets soaked with frost. The change accelerated. Her reflection no longer matched her movements. When she frowned, it smiled. When she turned her head, it lingered a second longer, as though another presence stared through her eyes. And sometimes, when she studied her skin closely, she swore she saw them, faces, dozens of them shimmering faintly beneath the surface, pressing upward, pleading. One night, she pressed a knife against her arm, desperate to cut them free. The blade skittered across her glowing skin, leaving no mark. The laughter inside her skull nearly drove her mad. You cannot open what we have sealed. You are perfect, perfect forever. She dropped the knife, sobbing, curling on the bathroom floor. Her mother returned once more, pounding on the door. Emily crouched in silence, glowing faintly in the dark, her breath fogging the air. Sweetheart, please. Her mother's voice cracked. I know you're in there. Let me see you. Emily pressed her forehead to the wood, tears freezing against her cheeks. For a moment she wanted to fling the door open, to collapse into her mother's warmth, to beg for help, but the voices coiled tight around her ribs, suffocating. If she sees, she will scream. If she screams, they will come. And if they come, they will take us away. Do you want to lose us? Do you want to lose yourself? Emily stayed silent. At last, her mother's footsteps retreated, swallowed by the night. Emily wept until dawn. She realized, finally, that there was no undoing. The cream had fused with her, body and soul. The glow was no longer on her skin, it was her skin. The whispers were no longer foreign, they were her thoughts, her breath, her pulse. She stood before the mirror one last time, trembling. Her reflection gleamed with terrifying beauty, radiant and cold, ageless and inhuman. Behind that face shimmered dozens more, shifting faintly, pressing upward in waves. They whispered together, a single chorus, a litany of devotion. We are eternal. We are service. We are you. Emily raised her hand to the glass. Her reflection raised its hand as well, but its smile was wider. And when their palms met, the mirror fogged with frost. From that night onward, Emily no longer walked the streets of Beaufort as herself. Neighbors glimpsed her now and then, luminous in the fog, her skin radiant like moonlight on water. Some swore she looked younger each time, impossibly so. Others whispered of the chill that clung to the air long after she passed, the frost blooming on windowsills in midsummer. But none could deny her beauty, and none could meet her eyes without shivering. Story 4. The Mender. New Hampshire towns have a way of wearing silence like a second skin, especially in winter, when the snow turns every street into a corridor of muffled echoes, when even the church bells seem hesitant to ring. John lived in one such town. A place so small you could walk from one end to the other in less than 15 minutes. A place where the general store doubled as the post office, and the diner's waitress knew not just your name but the way you took your coffee. His workshop stood at the edge of Main Street, squeezed between an abandoned tailor's shop and a shuttered bookstore. The sign above the door read simply, "The Mender." Inside, the air was always heavy with dust and varnish. Shelves sagged with old radios, clocks, jewelry boxes, toys with peeling paint, lamps whose light had long gone out, rocking chairs whose rhythm had been lost to broken spindles, all waiting for John's hands. He had been mending things for as long as he could remember. It was more than work, it was compulsion. He hated the thought of something broken left to die. To restore was to breathe life back into what time had taken. But John had begun to notice something strange. The older the object, the more it seemed to resist him. Some clocks ticked faintly before he touched them. Some radios hummed without power. Tools slipped from his hands at odd moments, as if the objects themselves recoiled. He told himself it was fatigue, imagination, the loneliness of too many nights spent over a workbench, until the woman came. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where snow came down in fine powder, coating the street in white silence. John was sweeping the floor when the bell above the door rang. She entered without sound, tall, wrapped in a dark coat, her face obscured by a scarf. She carried something wrapped in cloth. "Are you John?" she asked. Her voice was soft, steady, like someone speaking from far away. "Yes," he said, setting the broom aside. She placed the bundle on the counter. "I was told you mend what others cannot." John unfolded the cloth carefully. Inside lay a music box. Its wood was scratched, its brass winding key bent, the lid warped from age. The painted ballerina within leaned at an angle, her arms frozen mid-pose. John lifted it gently. It was heavier than it looked. "Beautiful piece," he murmured. 19th century, maybe earlier. "Where did you?" But when he looked up, the woman was gone. The bell above the door had not rung. The shop was empty, the snow outside undisturbed. That night, John could not sleep. The music box sat on his workbench, the ballerina's cracked face staring at the ceiling. He ran his fingers along the wood, feeling the grooves, the dents of time. Something pulsed faintly beneath the surface, like warmth where there should be none. He fetched his tools. The first twist of the key made the mechanism groan. He adjusted it, tightened a screw, coaxed it forward, and then, faintly, the ballerina turned. The melody that spilled out was not the sweet tinny tune of most music boxes. It was low, minor, trembling, and beneath it he swore he heard a voice. A woman's sigh. Soft, desperate. John froze, leaning closer. The ballerina's porcelain lips seemed to part. He slammed the lid shut, heart racing. The melody cut off, leaving only the hiss of the radiator and the howl of wind outside. He stared at the music box, chest heaving, the silence pressing harder than the sound had. For the first time in his life, John wondered if he had not been mending objects at all, but mending something trapped inside them. John tried to tell himself it had been nothing, a trick of fatigue. The groan of the old gears in the music box bending itself into the shape of a sigh. He had been awake too long, that was all. He had imagined the lips of the porcelain ballerina parting, imagined the warmth radiating from the wood. But in the morning, when he came down the creaking stairs to the shop, the music box was still there on the workbench, its lid closed, its weight undeniable. And though he had no memory of winding it, faint notes echoed in the room, as though the melody had been playing just before he opened the door. The air smelled different too, not only of varnish and dust, but faintly and possibly of lilac, his late wife's favorite perfume. John sat heavily on the stool, rubbing his hands together. His bones ached in the cold, and yet the closer he leaned toward the box, the warmer he felt. The day passed with the usual rhythm of the town. A man came in with a chipped clock, its pendulum long gone. A woman brought an old rocking chair, its joints loose. John worked steadily, fingers careful, mind elsewhere. But each time he turned back to the workbench, the music box seemed to pull at him, as if it were aware of his neglect. By evening, he gave in. He opened the lid, adjusted the bent brass key, and let the gears turn. The melody spilled out again, low, mournful, minor. The ballerina twirled awkwardly on her crooked bass, and beneath the notes, he heard it once more, a sigh. Then a whisper. "Help me." John's breath caught. His eyes darted around the empty shop. No one. Only shelves of silent objects staring back. The whisper came again, clearer. "You hear me?" At last. He slammed the lid shut, chest pounding. But when he lifted his head, the other objects in the room seemed to lean closer. The rocking chair creaked faintly, though no one sat in it. The chipped clock ticked once, a sound too sharp for its broken state. John stood, stumbling back. "No," he muttered. "No, no, no." The bell above the door rang. A man entered, hat dusted with snow, carrying a leather case. "Evening, John," he said, as though nothing were amiss. "Got something for you." Been in the family a long while. He placed the case on the counter, opened it to reveal a pocket watch. Tarnished silver, its chain tangled, the glass cracked. John picked it up with shaking hands. The watch was cold, colder than the air. But as he cradled it, warmth spread through his palm. A thrum, like a heartbeat, and faintly, beneath the tick that should not have been there, a voice. "I am still waiting." That night, John could not keep away. He set the pocket watch beside the music box, their presence heavy, magnetic. He told himself he would study them, understand the mechanics, find the rational explanation. But as the hours passed, he heard them, both of them, the sigh of the music box, the patient whisper of the watch. They spoke not in words alone, but in feelings. Grief, loneliness, hunger for release. And when John leaned closer, pressing his ear against the bench, he realized the entire room was breathing. The rocking chair creaked again. The chipped clock ticked. The broken lamp hummed faintly, though its bulb had been gone for years. Every object in the shop carried a voice. John pressed his palms to his ears, stumbling back until his shoulders struck the door. "Stop it," he cried. "You're just wood and metal. You're not real." But even as he shouted, the voices hushed in unison, as though listening. And then, together, they spoke. "We are what remains. You mend our cages. You make them whole again. But we do not want wholeness. We want release." John sank to his knees, shaking. His tools clattered to the floor. His entire life, every repair, every stitch, every polish suddenly felt like chains tightening, not kindness. He had not been restoring objects. He had been restoring prisons. The days that followed blurred into a fever. Customers came and went, bringing radios, lockets, clocks. Each one he touched thrummed with something alive. Some voices cried, some whispered, some laughed bitterly. At night, the whispers grew louder. They filled the workshop, pressing into his ears, vibrating in his teeth. He stopped sleeping upstairs. The voices seeped through the floorboards. He began to dream with his eyes open. Faces hovered in the lamplight, faces not his own, pale and translucent, flickering like reflections in rippling glass. They stared at him with hollow patience. "You can hear us," they said. "You are the mender. But we do not need mending. We need release." John grew gaunt. His hands trembled from more than age now. The diner's waitress remarked on his pallor, the way he stared too long at the coffee steam as though listening to something inside it. He avoided conversation. Words felt dangerous. If he spoke, he feared the voices would answer aloud. But he could not avoid the work. The compulsion still drove him. When someone placed a broken heirloom in his hands, he felt the weight of the soul within it. He felt its sorrow, its plea. And still, he fixed it. His tools moved of their own accord, stitching, polishing, tightening. Each time, the voice inside the object sighed, not with relief, but with despair. One evening, as snow thickened outside, John sat before the music box again. The ballerina twirled weakly, her cracked face gleaming in the lamplight. "Tell me what you are," he whispered. The sigh came, followed by words that chilled his blood. "We are the remnants of the forgotten, bound by grief, bound by memory, bound by hands like yours. You give us form. You trap us deeper. Only you can open the way out." John's hands shook. "I don't know how." The voices rose together, filling the shop until the glass panes trembled. "You will." Snow fell for 3 days without pause. The town shrank beneath it. Roads narrowed to single lanes. Footsteps vanished moments after they were made. Main Street looked abandoned, a strip of shuttered facades with only John's workshop burning light against the white hush. Inside, the air was warm but restless. Every object seemed alive now. The rocking chair groaned faintly when he passed it. The chipped clock ticked at odd hours, as though a heartbeat pulsed inside. The radios whispered static without power, words half-formed, lost between stations. John stopped sweeping the floor. He stopped polishing shelves, all his energy bent toward listening, because the voices had grown bold. At first they only sighed, whispered, pleaded. Now they shared memories. When he wound the pocket watch, he saw flashes behind his eyelids, an old man's hands trembling over a letter never finished. When he opened the music box, he smelled lilac again, saw a woman dancing in a parlor lit by oil lamps, laughter frozen in porcelain. Each object carried a fragment, not just sound, but weight, regret, anger, longing. The more he handled them, the heavier he felt. His chest ached, his breath shortened, as though he were carrying more lives than his own. One evening, unable to bear it, John took apart the watch. He spread its tiny gears across the bench, heart pounding. Inside he expected springs, coils, metal dust. Instead, beneath the brass, he found something else, something that did not belong. A single thread of hair, fine, gray, coiled between the gears. When he touched it, a voice flooded his skull. I never left the house that day. I watched the snow fall. I wanted to go outside, but he locked the door. John staggered back, clutching his head. The hair slipped from his fingers, but the voice lingered. I am still waiting by the window, waiting for the key. He slammed the pieces of the watch back into their case, hands trembling, but the air did not clear. The presence remained, pressing against him, patient and heavy. The next day, he pried open the music box. Beneath the warped wood and bent brass key, stuffed into the hollow, lay something brittle, a sliver of bone. John froze, stomach churning. He wanted to throw it across the room, but his hands refused. The bone was warm. It pulsed faintly against his palm, as though a memory still clung to it. The sigh rose again, not from the mechanism, but from the fragment itself. He gave me flowers, lilac. He said he loved me, but love can be a cage too. John dropped it, staggering back until he struck the shelf. Objects rattled around him, each humming, each whispering, each waiting. His heart hammered. God help me, he whispered. What are you? That night, the dream came. He stood in his workshop, but every object glowed faintly, casting halos against the rafters. Faces swam within the wood. The metal, the glass faces pressed against surfaces too small to hold them. They turned toward him in unison. You are the mender, they said, their voices woven together like a hymn. You bind us tighter with every stitch, every screw, but you are also the breaker. You alone can unbind. John's knees weakened. Why me? Why only me? The faces shifted, overlapping, endless. Because you listen, because you do not discard the broken, because your hands have always carried more than they should. The dream dissolved into whiteness, and John woke with tears freezing on his cheeks. From then on, every repair was torment. A lamp carried the rage of a soldier lost overseas. A locket hummed with a mother's grief. A rocking horse whispered lullabies that turned into sobs. Each time John mended them, the voices grew sharper, angrier. You tighten the cage. You polish our prison. Stop binding us. Set us free. His tools shook in his hands. His breath came ragged. He could no longer deny it. He was not repairing objects. He was deciding the fate of souls. The townsfolk noticed. At the diner, the waitress asked why his eyes looked sunken, why his hands shook so badly he spilled coffee. He muttered something about age, about the weather. But when she touched his arm in sympathy, he felt her warmth strike him like sunlight, and for a moment he thought he heard her heartbeat join the chorus in his skull. He fled before she could ask more. Back in the workshop, the silence closed around him like water. Only it was not silence anymore. It was breathing, waiting. That evening, he stood before the music box and the watch, the two objects that had begun this unraveling. His reflection in the glass pane above the bench looked gaunt, haunted. I can't mend you anymore, he whispered, but I don't know how to set you free. The air shifted, heavy, electric. You will learn, they whispered, or you will join us. John's chest tightened. The weight of them pressed down, not just voices but memories, lives stacked upon his shoulders. He felt himself bending, cracking, as though his own body might become another vessel. He closed his eyes, trembling, and in the dark, he heard the truth at last. Every object he had ever mended, every clock, every toy, every lamp had never left him. They had only filled him, and the weight of their souls was becoming unbearable. The storm rolled in without warning. Snow thickened to a wall of white, burying Main Street in silence so deep it felt like the world had been erased. John's workshop glowed faintly through the drifts, its single lamp flickering like a beacon in a drowned world. Inside, he sat hunched at the bench, head in his hands, surrounded by the objects that whispered and groaned. The air trembled with their presence. Every shelf seemed to breathe. Every clock ticked without power. Every toy shifted faintly in the shadows. The voices layered over one another, rising and falling like a tide of grief. You mend us. You bind us. You hold us here. John's chest tightened. I never meant to, he rasped. His voice cracked against the hush. I only wanted to make things whole again. The chorus rose, sharp with anger. Whole is prison. Whole is silence. Release us. He stumbled from the bench, pressing his palms to his ears, but their voices vibrated through the floorboards, through the glass panes, through his own bones. He could not shut them out. He staggered to the rocking chair in the corner, its wood groaning as though someone invisible shifted in the seat. He gripped the armrest, his breath ragged. What do you want me to do? He whispered. The answer came in unison, rattling the jars on the shelves. Break us. John recoiled. His tools had always been for mending, for healing, for restoring. To break was betrayal, sacrilege. But the voices pressed harder, filling the room until the air seemed to crackle with frost. We are bound in wood and brass. We are knotted in fabric and glass. Only you can sever the chains. He turned to the music box, its ballerina leaning in frozen poise. The cracked porcelain face gleamed under the lamplight. He remembered the sigh, the faint perfume of lilac, the whispered plea. Help me. His trembling hand reached for it. If he smashed it, the soul might be free. But what if it vanished? What if it dissolved into nothing, lost forever? Are you certain? He asked aloud, voice breaking. The ballerina twitched. The lid rattled faintly. Certain. Please. John raised the hammer from his bench. His hand shook violently. The weight of it felt alien. He had spent his life preserving, never destroying. He lifted it higher, and froze, because from the pocket watch came another voice. Stronger, angrier. Do not break us. To destroy is to erase. Keep us whole. Keep us safe. Mend us forever. John's knees buckled. He dropped the hammer with a crash that echoed through the shop. The voices surged in chaos, pleading, screaming, arguing, overlapping until he could not tell one from another. Release us. Bind us. Do not let us vanish. Do not leave us here. He clutched his head, tears streaming down his face. Stop. I can't choose. But the truth pressed cold and merciless against him. He was the only one who could. That night, the dream returned. He stood in the workshop, but the shelves stretched endlessly, filled with objects glowing faintly in the dark. Each contained a face, pressed against the surface, mouths moving in silent desperation. The woman was there too, the one who had brought the music box. Her scarf was gone now, her face pale, her eyes hollow. You know what you are, she said. Her voice was both hers and not hers, layered with others. You are not merely the mender. You are the keeper of chains. John shook his head violently. I never wanted this. She stepped closer, her outline flickering as though she were both woman and shadow. Wanting has nothing to do with it. You were chosen because you could hear, because you cared for the broken. But care is a chain, too. Her hand lifted, pointing to the shelves. Free us or bind us forever. There is no third path. He woke with his heart hammering, his pillow damp with tears. For the first time in his life, his workshop no longer felt like home. It felt like a prison, and he was the warden. The snow outside buried the street in silence. No customers came. No one would disturb him. It was just him and the voices. He stood at the bench, hammer in one hand, needle in the other. The choice burned in him. Mend, and the souls would linger, trapped, preserved, but suffering. Break, and they might be freed or erased. Either way, his hands would decide. He looked at the music box. The ballerina's cracked lips parted faintly. Please. He looked at the watch. The tick grew louder. Keep me. John's knees shook. His throat closed. The storm outside howled, rattling the windows. He realized then that no matter what choice he made, he would not escape. He was bound as surely as they were. The only question was whether he would be the mender of objects or the breaker of souls. The storm did not pass. For days, the snow pressed against the windows of the workshop, sealing the street in silence, until it felt to John as though the entire world had vanished beyond those walls, leaving only him, the smell of dust and varnish, and the chorus of voices that pulsed from every shelf and corner. He moved through the dim room like a ghost, too tired to eat, too restless to sleep, his hands trembling as they hovered over the music box and the watch and the endless fragments of memory that lay disguised as objects. Each time he picked up a tool, he felt their weight pressing harder against him. Not only the weight of wood and brass, but the sorrow of lives unfinished, of people who had once loved and lost, who had been forgotten, whose remnants now clung to the shells he had tried to mend. He understood now that his work had never been about restoration. It had always been about custody. Each stitch, each tightened screw, each polished surface had not healed but bound, sealing the remnants deeper, locking them away where no one else could hear. He had been their warden, not their savior. And with that realization came the ache of guilt so sharp it hollowed him out. And yet they had not abandoned him. They whispered still, sometimes pleading, sometimes demanding, sometimes contradicting one another until the air grew thick with argument, but always circling back to him, always reminding him that only his hands could decide. In the stillness of one long night, when the snow pressed thickest and even the lamps seemed dimmer, he set the music box and the watch side by side. He lit no fire, for the voices made the room feel feverish despite the winter outside. He sat with the hammer in one hand and the needle in the other, his eyes burning as though he had not blinked in hours. The ballerina's cracked porcelain face stared up at him, her lips parted as if to whisper again, while the watch ticked steadily, though its gears had long since failed. He imagined smashing the box, watching the fragments scatter, hearing the voices shriek before they dissolved into nothing. He imagined tightening the screws once more, polishing the wood, winding the key, and hearing the sigh return, softer now, resigned. He imagined breaking the watch, shattering the chain, releasing the memory of the old man waiting at his window. He imagined binding it tighter, keeping the beat of a heart that no longer lived. Each possibility weighed the same: salvation or erasure, mercy or cruelty, and he had no way of knowing which path was which. His breath slowed. The storm outside howled like distant voices carried on the wind. His own reflection shimmered faintly in the glass pane above the bench, his face hollow, his eyes haunted, and behind that reflection he thought he saw others, hundreds of them, crowding the surface, waiting. He lowered the hammer. He set down the needle. For the first time in his life, his hands were still. He whispered, though no one else would ever hear, that he could no longer choose between binding and breaking, that perhaps the only choice left to him was to carry them differently, not in wood or brass or porcelain, but in himself. And as he spoke, the air shifted, the voices quieted, not gone but softer, like a tide that had turned. He closed his eyes and pressed both hands against the music box and the watch, not to mend, not to smash, but simply to hold. A warmth spread through his chest, slow and steady, rising until it filled every trembling vein. He felt them moving then, the remnants, the fragments, the lives unfinished. They seeped into him, not violently, but like smoke curling under a door, like snow melting into water. His lungs filled with their sighs. His heartbeat took on their rhythm. His breath carried their voices. The workshop fell silent. The music box did not play. The watch did not tick. The chair did not creak. Only John sat there in the dim lamplight, eyes closed, shoulders bowed, and within him 1,000 whispers stirred. When dawn came, the storm broke. Main Street lay buried in snow, pale light spilling across the rooftops. The townsfolk would later say they noticed something strange that morning. The workshop stood dark for the first time in years. No lamp burned in the window. No faint hum of tools echoed inside. When at last they forced the door, they found the shelves of objects neatly arranged, silent, empty of presence. The music box sat closed, The watch unwound, both still as if they had never been touched. John was not there. Not in the chair, not at the bench, not upstairs in the narrow bed. Some swore they felt the air colder than usual, as though winter lingered inside the walls. Others thought they heard something faint. When they leaned too close to the shelves, a hush, a breath, perhaps their own heartbeat. But no one ever saw John again. And yet, on nights when the town is stillest, when snow presses against the windows and silence deepens beyond bearing, some say the workshop hums faintly once more, as though a man is at work inside, mending or breaking, or perhaps simply listening. And if you press your ear to the glass, you might hear it too, not the creak of wood or the tick of clocks, but the murmur of many voices, woven together, gentle as a sigh, eternal as snow. Story 5. The Dead Child's Clothes. Oregon suburbs carry their own kind of silence, not the bustling hush of a city trying to rest, but the deeper quiet of fir trees pressing close to neighborhoods, of mist curling low over roofs, of deer wandering into yards as though the boundary between forest and home meant nothing. When David and Claire bought the house on Alder Lane, they thought they had found the perfect place to raise their little girl. The street was lined with maples, their bare branches scratching softly against winter skies, and the house itself looked ordinary enough, 2 stories of weathered siding, a fenced yard, a wide porch that creaked but held steady. They unpacked in the usual rush, cardboard boxes stacked in corners, laughter echoing as they argued over where the couch should sit. Their daughter, Lily, darted from room to room, her small voice carrying up the stairs as she claimed which bedroom would be hers. By dusk, the family stood on the balcony, looking out over the quiet street. That was when they noticed it. On the far end of the balcony railing, half hidden beneath a pile of dust and leaves, hung a shirt, small, faded blue, the fabric stiff with age. Children's clothing. Claire bent to lift it. The material crackled faintly under her fingers. She frowned, brushing away dirt. "Must have been left behind," she murmured. David shrugged. "Probably from the last family." Surprised the movers didn't toss it. They laughed it off, the way people laugh at small oddities during a move, and went back inside. But when night came, and the wind whispered through the fir trees, Claire swore she heard the faint rustle of fabric outside. She rose from bed, peered through the curtain. The little shirt shifted on the balcony rail, as though stirred by hands too small to see. The next morning, Claire mentioned it at breakfast. The shirt, it moved. David chuckled over his coffee. "Wind, Claire. We're in Oregon. Everything moves in the wind." But Lily, perched at the table with her bowl of cereal, tilted her head. "I saw it too," she said matter-of-factly. "It was waving at me." Claire froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Waving?" Lily nodded. "Like this." She lifted her hand and wagged her fingers in the air. Innocent, cheerful. David frowned, uneasy now. "It's just fabric catching the draft, honey. That's all." But Claire noticed the goosebumps rising along her arms, and she said nothing more. That evening, while David set up the television and Lily played on the living room rug, Claire stepped out to the balcony again. The shirt still hung there, faded blue against the gray wood. She reached for it, intending to fold it away, maybe toss it into the garbage. But as her hand brushed the sleeve, a chill ran up her arm, sharp enough to make her gasp. She pulled back instantly. The fabric shifted on the railing, not fluttering like cloth in the wind, but tugging, as if a child's hand had drawn it closer. Claire whispered, "Who left you here?" No answer came, only the faint creak of the balcony boards beneath her feet, and the soft hiss of fir needles brushing in the wind. Yet when she turned to go back inside, she swore she heard the tiniest sound behind her, a giggle. The days that followed were ordinary in the way new houses often are: boxes unpacked, curtains hung, groceries stocked into unfamiliar cupboards, but underneath the routines, Claire felt the house watching them. It wasn't anything she could name at first, only a heaviness in certain rooms, a reluctance of light to settle in corners. The balcony especially seemed to hold its breath. Each morning when she slid open the glass door, the faded blue shirt was still there, draped across the railing as though it belonged. And though she tried twice to throw it out, she found it waiting again by evening, folded neatly over the wood as if returned by unseen hands. Lily began to talk about it in ways that made Claire's stomach knot. "He likes me," she would say, drawing pictures at the kitchen table, stick figures holding hands, one labeled Lily, the other simply H. When Claire asked what H stood for, Lily shrugged as though it were obvious. His name, Henry. Claire shared this with David one night while they were brushing their teeth. He frowned, foam at the corner of his mouth. Imaginary friends. Kids make them up all the time. Moving into a new place, it's normal. But when Claire pointed out the shirt and the way it never stayed gone, David grew quiet. He muttered something about neighbors playing tricks, about raccoons, about anything except what both of them feared to say. It was the male woman who gave Claire the first piece of truth. She was a broad-shouldered woman in a thick coat, cheeks red from the Oregon wind. As Claire signed for a package, the male woman squinted at the house. Didn't think anyone would move in here so soon, she said casually. Claire forced a smile. Why is that? The male woman shrugged, but her eyes lingered on the balcony. Family used to live here, couple and a boy. Tragic, really. Happened, maybe 15 years ago now. The boy drowned in the creek out back. Whole town turned out for the funeral. After that, the parents couldn't stay. House sat empty ever since. Claire felt her throat tighten. She thanked the woman, closed the door, and pressed her back against it. The creek. They had walked by it just yesterday. Lily tossing pebbles into the water, laughing as the ripples spread. Claire remembered the sound of the current, then fast, restless, tugging at the banks as though it wanted more. She climbed the stairs, opened the balcony door. The shirt hung there, pale blue in the gray light. Sleeves lifted faintly in the breeze. For the first time, she thought she saw the outline of small shoulders beneath it, as though someone invisible wore the fabric. That night, she dreamed of water, not the gentle lapping of a creek, but the violent rush of it, dark and cold, pulling at her ankles. She heard a child's voice calling, muffled by the current, and when she woke, her cheeks were wet with tears. In the hallway, she found Lily standing in her pajamas, hair tangled, eyes half shut with sleep. He's cold, the little girl whispered. Claire knelt, heart racing. Who is baby? Henry. Lily's eyes lifted to the dark balcony door. He doesn't like being alone. The following day, Claire drove to the library, leaving David with Lily. She asked for old property records, combed through newspapers yellowed with time. It didn't take long to find the headline. Boy, age 6, drowns in Alder Creek. The article was short, clinical, but the details scraped her raw. The boy's name was Henry Whitmore. His body had been found caught against a fallen log. The parents, inconsolable, moved away within the year. Claire sat there for a long time, the hum of fluorescent lights pressing down on her. The smell of paper and dust thick in her lungs. She could almost hear the creek rushing beneath the words, almost feel the wet fabric of a shirt clinging to her skin. When she returned home, Lily ran to her, holding out something clenched in her small fist. Claire's stomach lurched when she saw it. A sock, child-sized, damp, muddy. He gave it to me, Lily said brightly, so I won't forget him. Oh, Claire dropped the sock into the trash bin, her hands shaking. But she knew already it would not stay there. That evening, as snow misted against the windows, the family gathered in the living room. David tried to keep things light, pizza boxes on the table, a movie flickering on the television, but Claire's gaze kept drifting to the staircase. She thought she saw movement there, a pale blur darting past the banister. Lily giggled softly, as if someone had whispered to her. Claire whispered to David, "He's here." David stiffened, jaw tight, but said nothing. His eyes betrayed the truth, though. He had seen it too. Later that night, Claire stood once more at the balcony door. The shirt shifted gently on the railing. Behind her, she heard the faint scuffle of feet, the soft exhale of a giggle. She whispered into the dark, "Henry, what do you want from us?" The fabric lifted, sleeves spreading like arms outstretched, and in the hush of the Oregon night, Claire thought she heard the smallest voice, thin and eager, brushing against her ear like the brush of fabric in the wind. Someone to play with. The house grew restless. At first it was only the blue shirt, always waiting on the balcony rail no matter where Claire tried to hide it. But soon other garments began to appear. A pair of small trousers folded neatly on the banister, a child's cap resting on the kitchen counter in the morning light. Once, Claire opened the linen closet and found a row of socks, mismatched, dangling from the shelf like they had been hung there by careful little hands. Each time she touched them, A chill ran through her fingers, spreading up her arm like water. Each time she threw them out, they returned by nightfall. Lily delighted in them. She wore the cap, tugged the socks onto her dolls, laughed as though someone whispered jokes only she could hear. "Henry wants to play hide and seek," she said one afternoon, her face flushed with excitement. She darted from room to room, opening doors, calling into closets, her laughter mingling with another sound. Claire swore she heard a lighter giggle, faint and distant, but unmistakably not her daughter's. David tried to stay steady. He muttered explanations about neighbors, about old boxes left behind, about tricks of memory, but Claire saw the way his eyes lingered on the balcony at night, the way he double-locked the back door, though no one had keys but them. She knew he felt it too, that sense of being watched by something child-sized, eager, impatient. One evening, while Claire folded laundry, she heard footsteps upstairs. Lily was supposed to be in bed, yet the sound was heavier than her small body should have made. She climbed the stairs, slowly, heart thudding, and stopped outside Lily's door. The room was dark, moonlight seeping through the curtains. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, whispering. Opposite her, a shirt and trousers were arranged upright, sleeves propped as if on invisible shoulders. They swayed faintly, as though nodding. Claire's breath caught. "Who are you talking to, baby?" she asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Lily looked up, blinking innocently. "Henry. He says he likes when I tell him stories." The clothes shifted then, arms twitching, a sleeve brushing the rug. Claire lunged forward, snatched them up, stuffed them into the hallway hamper. Her hands shook violently, but when she turned back, Lily was frowning. "Mommy, you made him sad." Claire pressed her daughter against her chest, whispering assurances, but in the corner of the room she thought she saw the faint outline of a small figure, hazy, translucent, watching, with hollow patience. The next day David insisted they confront it. He carried the blue shirt outside, doused it in lighter fluid, and set a match. The fabric curled and blackened, smoke rising into the cold Oregon air. He stood over it grimly until nothing remained but ash. That night, Claire woke to the sound of rustling. She sat up, heart racing, and saw at the foot of the bed a pile of neatly folded clothes. The same shirt, the same trousers, the same socks. Restored. Perfect. And on the balcony beyond the glass, something moved. A child-sized shape leaned against the railing, head tilted, as if listening. Claire clutched David's arm. He stirred, eyes widening, breath catching in his throat. They watched together as the shirt's sleeves rose slowly, wagging back and forth in the gesture Lily had shown them, waving. By now the house was full of them, shirts on doorknobs, trousers draped over chairs, caps appearing in drawers. The presence multiplied, pressing against every corner. Claire felt it in the hallways, in the mirrors, in the hush of rooms where no one stood. The worst was when she found Lily in the kitchen one dawn, spooning cereal into a second bowl placed carefully across from her. The chair was empty, but the bowl shifted, spoon rattling faintly. Milk spilled onto the table, though no hand held it. Lily giggled. "Henry's messy," she said. Claire's stomach nodded. She wanted to scream, to sweep the bowl away, but the sight of her daughter's joy held her silent. At night, the games grew stranger. Doors opened and closed softly as though during hide and seek. Tiny footsteps pattered in the hall, lighter than Lily's. Sometimes Claire heard the sound of marbles rolling across the floor upstairs. Though no toys had been unpacked there, David began to snap under the strain. He shouted into empty rooms, demanded that whatever haunted them show itself, but the only reply was laughter, thin, high-pitched, and echoing from everywhere at once. Claire begged him not to raise his voice. "It's a child," she whispered. "He doesn't understand. He just wants to play." But even as she said it, she felt the cold seeping deeper, the games darker, the laughter less innocent. One night, as wind rattled the fir trees outside, Claire woke to find Lily's bed empty. Panic surged through her. She and David searched the house, calling her name, their voices shaking. They found her on the balcony, the blue shirt draped around her small shoulders like a cape. She stood at the railing, giggling softly as though listening to a joke whispered close to her ear. Claire rushed forward, scooping her into her arms. The shirt slipped to the floor, limp once more, but Claire felt the icy chill of unseen fingers brushing her back. Lily wriggled, frowning. "You ruined the game again." And as Claire carried her inside, she glanced over her shoulder. For the briefest moment, she swore she saw a boy standing where the shirt had been, pale, wet, smiling. The house was no longer quiet. It carried the sound of play, but not the kind that warms a home. It was the scuffle of small feet running where no child should be, the creak of doors opening when no hand touched them, the faint clatter of toys rolling across the floor though no toys had been unpacked, and above it all lingered laughter light, high-pitched, carried through the halls at odd hours, sometimes blending with Lily's, sometimes echoing after she had already fallen silent. At first, Claire tried to convince herself that Henry was only lonely, that he meant no harm, that his games were the desperate gestures of a boy who had never finished childhood. But then came the night she found Lily standing in the hallway, her body stiff as though listening, her head tilted toward the open linen closet. Claire whispered her name, but Lily did not answer. The closet door shuddered faintly, and from inside came the sound of fabric rustling, dozens of sleeves brushing against one another. Claire rushed forward, scooping her daughter into her arms, slamming the door shut. Lily blinked up at her, confused, murmuring that Henry had only been teaching her a new game. After that, Claire began to notice the rules. When Lily hid, the clothes moved to cover her. When she sought, they tugged open drawers, pointed her toward corners of shadow. And sometimes when Lily refused to play, the clothes would gather on their own, folded neatly into the shape of a child and left sitting in the middle of her room, waiting patiently until she returned. David grew restless. He tried to burn the garments again, tried to box them up and haul them to the dump, but each time they returned, sometimes draped across the couch, sometimes folded at the foot of Lily's bed, sometimes swinging gently from the balcony rail as though a breeze had given them life. He began drinking in the evenings, staring at the dark glass of the television screen where faint shapes seemed to ripple, muttering that he would not let a dead child take his living one. Claire felt the cold deepening. The warmth of their new home never seemed to hold, no matter how high the heater ran. She woke often to see her breath fogging faintly above the pillow, and in those moments she swore she felt small hands tugging at the sheets, as though demanding she join in the game too. It was Lily who changed most quickly. She grew pale, her laughter more brittle, her eyes shadowed as though she did not sleep. She spoke often of Henry, not as if he were a friend, but as if he were family, someone who belonged more to the house than they did. She drew pictures of him in her notebooks, not stick figures anymore, but detailed faces, a boy with hollow eyes and a wide smile, always surrounded by clothes, shirts, and socks and caps drawn as though they had arms and legs of their own. One morning, Claire found her daughter's bed empty again, the sheets neatly folded as though prepared for someone else. Panic shot through her. She ran from room to room until she heard faint laughter drifting from the basement. She hurried down the creaking steps and froze. Lily was crouched in the corner, her dolls arranged in a circle around her, but between the dolls sat a shirt and trousers, upright without support, sleeves swaying faintly. Lily's hands clapped in rhythm to some game Claire could not hear, her smile wide and strange. Claire's voice shook as she pulled Lily away. The clothes slumped to the floor, limp once more, but she felt the cold brush of air against her neck, as though something had leaned close to watch. The games became dangerous. Doors slammed shut behind them. Stairs creaked with invisible weight as if chasing their steps. Claire nearly tripped one evening when a shirt coiled itself around her ankle like a rope. David found himself locked out on the balcony in the freezing night, the door refusing to budge until he begged aloud, promising they would let Henry play longer tomorrow. Even the neighbors began to whisper. They claimed they saw movement in the upstairs windows at odd hours, the silhouette of a boy staring down at the street, though the family insisted only their daughter lived there. Some swore they heard laughter drifting from the open windows, laughter too high and sharp to belong to Lily. Claire stopped answering their questions. The shame was too heavy, the fear too sharp. One evening, as the rain lashed against the roof and the fir trees bent in the wind, Claire and David argued in hushed tones. He wanted to leave, to pack their things and never look back. She feared that leaving would not free them, that Henry had already bound himself too tightly to their daughter. Their voices rose until Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes strangely calm. She held the blue shirt in her arms like a beloved toy. "Henry says if you don't want to stay," she whispered, "he'll find new clothes to wear. He doesn't want to be alone anymore." The shirt sleeves twitched, lifting faintly in her hands. Claire felt her knees weaken. David's mouth opened, but no words came. And somewhere in the house, deep in the closets and drawers, the rustling of fabric rose in answer, as though 100 small bodies stirred, eager for the next game. The house had become a wardrobe. Every drawer whispered, every closet shifted, every hanger carried the faint weight of fabric that had not been there the night before. Claire no longer opened doors without bracing herself. David slept with the hammer by his side, though he never once found the courage to swing it. And Lily drifted through the rooms like she belonged to them less and less, her small hands trailing along banisters, her lips murmuring to someone they could not see, her eyes shining as though reflecting a light that was not in the house at all. It was subtle at first, the clothes appearing not only in corners but arranged in strange positions. A shirt with its sleeves stretched wide across the kitchen table as though waiting for supper. A pair of trousers dangling upright on the stairwell, knees bent, frozen mid-climb. Socks lined neatly along the windowsill, toes pointing outward like a row of spectators. Claire found herself whispering apologies as she passed them, as though not acknowledging them might provoke something worse. But then the accidents began. David slipped on the stairs one morning, his ankle twisting badly. When Claire rushed to help, she saw the culprit, a pair of trousers tied across the step like a rope, knotted into a child's crude trap. She tore them loose with shaking hands, but when she turned back, they were already coiled again, the fabric writhing faintly as though alive. Another night, Claire woke choking, her throat constricted by something cold and soft. She clawed at it and found a sleeve, wound tightly around her neck, the faded blue shirt pulling as if with invisible hands. David ripped it away, gasping in horror, but when he hurled it across the room, it landed upright on the floor, sleeves twitching as though laughing, and through it all, Lily only smiled. She drew more now, page after page, pictures of children, not just one but many, each dressed in shirts and trousers and socks, their bodies empty but their clothes alive. She told Claire that Henry had new friends, that he didn't have to be lonely anymore, that he was showing her how to play better games. When Claire asked what kind of games, Lily tilted her head, eyes far too calm for her age, and whispered that they were games you didn't get to stop playing. David raged then, shouting into the air, cursing the boy's name, demanding he leave their daughter alone. The house answered with laughter, thin and sharp, echoing from every closet. Clothes tumbled from hangers, draped themselves across the floor, circled around him until he staggered back in terror. He swore he felt dozens of small fists pummeling him from inside the fabric, sleeves tightening around his arms, socks coiling about his ankles. He fought his way free, bruised and gasping, and from the hallway he heard Lily's voice, small and serene. Henry doesn't like yelling. They tried to flee. One gray morning they packed hurriedly, shoving bags into the car, David half limping from his twisted ankle. But as they turned the key in the ignition, the engine would not start. The hood rattled, the belt squealed, and when David opened it to look, he found socks knotted around the wires, sleeves tied in a tangle across the battery, trousers stuffed into the machinery as though the house itself had reached out and refused to let them go. He tore at the fabric until his hands bled, but the knots only grew tighter. Claire dragged Lily back inside, tears streaming, her voice breaking as she begged the air to let them leave. The laughter that answered was softer this time, almost tender, the sound of a child amused by frightened parents. That night, they did not speak of escape again. The final revelation came quietly. Claire was searching through the attic, desperate for answers, when she found the old trunk shoved beneath the rafters. Inside were photographs, black and white, fading at the edges, of Henry Whitmore, the boy whose smile had once been ordinary, whose eyes were bright before they grew hollow in death. Next to the photos were garments folded with care, shirts, trousers, socks, a cap. She touched them gingerly and felt the cold surge through her. These were the originals, the clothes Henry had worn in life, preserved by grieving parents who had fled but never taken them away. When she lifted the cap, the air thickened. A voice brushed against her ear, sweet and fragile. "You found me. Now we can play forever." The attic filled with rustling. From the rafters hung dozens of garments that had not been there before, swaying as though in a windless draft. They reached toward her, sleeves stretching, trousers twisting, socks dangling like little bodies. She stumbled back, heart pounding, the cap falling from her hands, and below she heard Lily laughing. Not the laugh of a child, but something older, something carried on the breath of a boy who had waited too long. Claire and David knew then that the house was no longer theirs. It never had been. It belonged to Henry and to the wardrobe he had built from fabric and memory and grief. They tried to protect Lily, to keep her in their arms, but each night she slipped away, drawn to the balcony, where the blue shirt always waited. They watched helplessly as she leaned against the rail, sleeves wrapping around her shoulders like an embrace. Her giggle carried into the night. And when they begged her to stop, when they wept and pleaded, she only whispered that Henry didn't want to be alone, that he had promised her she never would be either. Weeks later, the neighbors noticed the house again. Curtains always drawn, lights flickering at odd hours, the sound of children's laughter echoing faintly from inside, though the family never came to town. Some claimed they saw multiple figures moving in the windows, not just one child, but many, all small, all draped in clothing that shifted on its own. No one asked too many questions. The house had a history. It always had. Story 6. The Tapping Window. The English countryside wears silence like a shawl. Even the wind that passes through hedgerows and over low stone walls seems hushed, softened by centuries of mist and moss. The lane to Mary's rented house was narrow, bordered by oaks that leaned so close, their branches tangled above like fingers locked in secret. Few cars ever passed, and when they did, their headlights scattered rabbits and foxes into the fields before disappearing again, leaving the world empty. The house itself stood at the edge of a meadow, its stones weathered, its roof sagging slightly as though tired from the weight of years. A place the villagers had mentioned with polite hesitation when Mary asked about it. Old, they said, a bit drafty, been empty a long while, but rents were cheap, and Mary wanted quiet. After years of city noise and crowded flats, the promise of solitude in the countryside felt like balm. Her room was small, tucked in the back corner of the house, with a single narrow window looking out onto the meadow. The glass was old, wavy, the kind that made the moon bend and shimmer like it was underwater. She liked that at first. It felt almost dreamlike. She placed her bed beneath it so she could fall asleep watching clouds drift over the fields. But on the very first night, as she drifted toward sleep, she heard it. Tap. Soft, delicate, almost polite. Her eyes opened, adjusting to the dark. The moonlight painted the window in pale silver. She waited, listening. Tap. A second one. Gentle, like the touch of a fingernail against glass. She sat up, heart quickening. Perhaps a branch, she thought. She pulled the curtain aside. Nothing but meadow stretching out under the moon, grasses bending faintly in the breeze. No trees close enough to reach the window. No rain, no hail, just the clear night. She let the curtain fall back, laughing softly at herself, but the sound caught in her throat. Tap, right against the glass. She did not sleep well. The next day she explored the house, looking for signs of drafts, loose shutters, anything that might explain it. But the walls were thick stone, the frames heavy. No branches touched the house. No gravel blown by wind could have struck the pane so evenly. She told herself old houses always made noises, and yet when evening fell and she sat reading by the small lamp, she found her eyes drifting to the window again and again, waiting. The first tap came just after midnight. She closed her book, heart tight in her chest. Tap. She stood, approached the window slowly, breath fogging faintly in the cool air. She leaned close, peering into the silver-lit meadow. Tap. The sound was not outside. It was on the glass itself. The vibration faint through her fingertips when she touched it. She whispered, "Who's there?" But the meadow gave no reply. When she returned to bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin, she could not shake the thought that the sound had been too precise, too measured, like someone insisting on being noticed. Tap. As she drifted into uneasy dreams, she began to wonder whether she had moved into a house that had never truly been empty at all. Mary spent the following day with a heaviness in her chest, as though the house had pressed its silence onto her shoulders. She tried to laugh at herself, tried to dismiss the tapping as nothing more than her imagination colliding with country quiet, but each time she glanced at the window she remembered the precision of the sound, the way it had seemed to answer her attention rather than the weather. The glass itself looked unchanged, old, warped, smudged with the faint trails of dust, but when she pressed her fingertips against it, she swore the chill that seeped into her skin felt more like breath than stone-cold pain. She walked to the village that afternoon, boots crunching on gravel lanes, hedgerows leaning inward like watchful faces. At the bakery, she lingered over tea, and when the owner asked how she was settling, Mary mentioned the house casually. The woman's smile stiffened. "That place?" she said, lowering her voice. "Lovely from the lane, yes, but it's been shut up nearly 20 years. Couldn't keep tenants. Always some complaint drafts, noises, the feeling of being watched. Nothing serious, but, well, you know how places can hold on to things." She left it at that, but Mary caught the way her eyes darted toward the other patrons, as though afraid of saying more aloud. Mary asked at the post office too, and the man behind the counter shrugged. "Belonged to an old family once. The Greaves. Moved away after their girl died. Some say she fell ill. Some say she vanished in the meadow. Nobody quite agrees. House has been empty since." The words stayed with her all the way back up the winding lane. The countryside so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. When she unlocked the door, the house smelled faintly of damp stone, as though it too had overheard and wanted to remind her of its age, its memory. That night she tried to prepare. She set her chair by the window, book in hand, lamp low, determined to face the noise when it came. Midnight crept in. The meadow bathed in pale fog. She stared until her eyes blurred. Tap. The sound came at last, soft but undeniable. She leaned close. Nothing but the meadow, silver and still. Tap. She pressed her hand against the glass, and the vibration shivered through her bones. This was no wandering branch, no stray pebble. Tap. 3 measured beats, as if knuckles rapped gently, asking permission. Her breath fogged faintly on the pane. She whispered, "Who are you?" The answer was silence, but the stillness felt heavier than any reply. She forced herself back to bed, blankets clutched around her. But the tapping returned at intervals, never hurried, never random, just steady enough to suggest patience, as though whoever or whatever stood there knew she was listening and would keep knocking until she chose to answer. By the third night, Mary stopped pretending it was anything but deliberate. She no longer searched for loose frames or imagined branches. She simply waited, tense and sleepless, for the sound to begin. The meadow lay hushed beneath the swollen moon, and the glass pane gleamed faintly, rippled by age. Midnight slid into the room like a tide, and with it came the first tap light, measured, like a finger tracing the line between dream and waking. She held her breath. Tap. This time it came sharper, as though the knuckle pressed harder. Tap. The third struck with weight enough that she swore the bed frame trembled. She sat up, pulse thudding, eyes fixed on the wavering glass. And yet the meadow outside stretched empty, silver grasses bending without form, the silence unbroken except for that sound against the pane. She pressed her hand to the window, fingers splayed. The vibration traveled into her bones. She whispered, "Please, stop." The tapping paused, as though it listened, then came again, quick and light, like laughter against glass. She pulled the curtains shut and lay down, but the sound did not fade. It grew softer instead, as though moving, shifting, no longer just at the window but sliding along the walls. A faint patter inside the plaster, a presence circling her. She buried her head beneath the blanket, heart hammering, until exhaustion claimed her. The following day she walked the meadow in pale sunlight, searching for prints, for signs of children, of anyone who might have played some cruel game. The earth was soft, the grass damp with dew, but no impressions marked the soil. Only her own boots trailed behind her. She spoke with a farmer she met at the edge of the lane, an old man with hands thick as roots. When she mentioned the house, he gave a slow shake of his head. "That window of yours, back corner? A girl used to sleep there. Said she heard knocking too. Told her parents someone wanted to come in. By the end, they thought she was fevered, hearing things. Then one night she was gone. Never found." Mary's throat tightened. "What year?" she asked. The man shrugged. "Before my time. But the house remembers. Places like that always do." That night she could not eat. She sat by the window, lamp low, waiting. Tap. The sound came sooner, before midnight. Insistent. Tap. Tap. She leaned forward. "What do you want?" she whispered. The glass quivered. The sound answered with 3 sharp knocks. Closer, quicker, like urgency rising. She stumbled back, Blankets clutched tight. The knocks followed her, not only on the window now but along the headboard, faint, rhythmic, as if fingers traced the wood above her skull. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of hands pressing against the glass, palms pale and wet, leaving streaks as they dragged downward. She woke with her breath fogging the air, and the faint echo of tapping still in her ears. By the fifth night, the sound had changed. It was no longer polite, no longer patient. It was steady, relentless, a heartbeat of knuckles striking wood and glass. Tap, tap, tap. Mary pressed her back against the far wall, hands over her ears. But it filled the room, vibrating through floorboards, rattling picture frames. She felt it inside her body, like bones clicking in rhythm. She shouted once, "Stop," but the sound did not pause. It only grew louder, closer, until she swore it came not from outside at all, but from within the pane itself, as if something crouched just on the other side of the warped glass, knocking to be let out. Her eyes blurred with tears. She stumbled forward, yanked the curtain shut, then pulled it open again, desperate to catch sight of a figure in the meadow. But there was only moonlight, grass bowing, mist curling along the hedgerows. Nothing stood there. And yet the sound was so close, so clear, so unshakably certain, that she pressed her palm flat against the pane and whispered, voice trembling, "I know you're there." The tapping stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, because she realized the glass was warm beneath her palm, warm and pulsing faintly, as though another hand pressed back from the inside. By the sixth night, Mary no longer tried to sleep. She lay awake in the narrow bed, eyes fixed on the warped glass pane that glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Every muscle tensed, waiting. The room was hushed, the kind of silence that seemed to listen back, and beneath it she felt the faint anticipation of the sound, like the hush before a knock at the door. When it came, she was almost relieved. Tap, gentle at first, a reminder. Tap, tap, sharper now, deliberate, closer. The rhythm built, a sequence too steady to be chance, and Mary pressed her blanket to her chest, whispering to herself that it was just glass, just air, just an old house speaking in its own way. But then the sound shifted. It was no longer on the pane alone. It crept along the sill, skittered up the frame, echoed faintly against the ceiling beams. The entire room became an instrument, the knocks reverberating like fingertips drumming wood, circling her slowly. Her breath caught as she realized it was moving. The taps traveled across the wall, down toward the floorboards, pausing, then resuming closer still. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the vibration sank deeper, crawling through the bed frame into her bones. She whispered, voice shaking, "Please, I hear you." For the first time, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. She sat up, hair clinging damp to her forehead, the blanket tangled around her legs. The window gleamed faintly in the corner of her vision, pale and watchful, as though waiting for her eyes to meet it. She forced herself to look, to confront whatever waited beyond the pane. And that was when she saw it, a handprint, faint, pale, pressed against the inside of the glass. The outline of small fingers, smeared downward as though dragging. Desperate to be seen, Mary stumbled back, knocking the lamp from the table. The bulb rolled, sputtered, shadows swelling in the corners. Her throat ached to scream, but no sound came. She could only stare as the handprint faded slowly, vanishing into the surface until only her own distorted reflection remained. The silence stretched, taut, waiting. Then came the knock again, but now it was not at the window. It was at the headboard, inches from her skull. Tap, tap. She clamped her hands over her mouth, tears spilling hot, and felt the vibration through the wood behind her head, measured, insistent, as though someone crouched just on the other side. Pressing closer, she whispered into the dark, "What do you want from me?" The knocks answered in quick succession, faster, louder, until the entire bed frame rattled. She bolted upright, fumbling for the door, and as she wrenched it open, she swore she heard the glass crack faintly behind her, a hairline fracture forming as though pressure built from within. She fled down the corridor, her footsteps muffled on the old carpet, the house groaning as though stirred awake. Every door she passed seemed to thud faintly from within, as if more hands tested their strength. By the time she reached the parlor, her chest heaved, her skin clammy with cold sweat. She collapsed into a chair, covering her face, whispering prayers she had not spoken since childhood. For a long time, the house was still. The only sound was her ragged breath, the wind faint beyond the stones. She almost convinced herself it had been exhaustion, a dream layered on dream. And then, from upstairs, she heard it. Tap. Slow. Patient. The sound moved down the hallway, closer to the stairs. Tap, tap. It descended one step at a time. Deliberate, measured. Tap. Onto the parlor floor. Mary's eyes lifted slowly, dread curdling in her stomach. The staircase was empty, shadows tangled in the banister. Yet the sound continued, crossing the floor toward her chair, unseen steps shaking the old boards. She pressed herself back, nails biting into the fabric of the chair. The air thickened, colder, her breath puffing faintly. She knew without question now. The tapping had never been an invitation from outside. It had always been here, pacing behind the glass, waiting for her to notice, waiting to step further in. When she dared look toward the window again, she saw not one handprint but many, pale smears spreading across the inside of the glass like children pressing their palms from the other side. The warped surface bulged faintly outward, straining, as though it were never meant to keep them contained. And all around her the sound resumed. Tap, 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 on the walls, on the ceiling, beneath the floor, closer each time, surrounding her in a circle of invisible fingers. Mary covered her ears, shut her eyes, and still she felt its small hands brushing her shoulders, her hair, her arms reminding her she was no longer alone in the room. The night stretched on without end, the house heavy with silence so thick it felt like water pressing in on all sides. Mary sat rigid in the parlor chair, her heart hammering against her ribs, the faint echoes of tapping still vibrating in her bones. She wanted to believe it had stopped, that exhaustion had tricked her, that the old house had spoken in its own way and now had gone still again. But she could not shake the certainty that something else breathed with her in the dark, something that had learned her name without needing to hear it. She rose slowly, legs trembling, and made her way back up the stairs. The boards groaned beneath her weight, and each creak felt like a reply, a reminder that she was not walking alone. When she reached the narrow hallway, the air was colder, sharp enough that her breath left a pale mist before her lips. The door to her room stood ajar. She had left it shut. Inside, the window gleamed in the moonlight, the warped glass throwing silver shapes across the walls. She hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming to flee, but the silence pulled her in, the way one is drawn to the edge of water despite the fear of falling. She stepped closer. The pane was no longer empty. Across its surface spread handprints, dozens of them, some small as a child's, some larger, pressed so hard the glass bowed outward, rippling faintly like skin under pressure. The prints overlapped, smeared downward, desperate to emerge. She whispered into the hush, "You're not outside, are you?" The answer came not in words, but in sound. Tap. From behind her, at the door. She spun, breath-catching, but nothing stood there. Tap. From beneath the bed. Her knees buckled, and she stumbled back. The knocking rose again, this time from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, a chorus of fingers drumming from every direction. She pressed her palms to her ears, but the sound lived inside her skull, rattling her teeth, vibrating through her spine. Then it stopped. The silence was worse. She opened her eyes and saw, reflected in the window, not just her own trembling form, but others behind her, faint outlines crowding the room, pale faces blurred, hollow eyes fixed on her. She turned, but the space was empty. When she looked back, the reflection remained. They were there, just outside of sight, standing so close she could feel the shift of air as though a crowd pressed in around her bed. Her breath hitched. "What do you want?" The tapping returned, this time not on glass or wood, but against her own shoulder, light, deliberate, like a hand reminding her she had been found. She froze, unable to move, unable to scream. Tap, tap, a rhythm of possession. Her eyes drifted once more to the glass, and now the truth was undeniable. The pain had never been a barrier at all. It was a mirror, a surface meant to keep her convinced the knocking was outside. But the hands had always been here, inside the room, circling, waiting. The final knock came from inside her headboard, sharp enough to make the wood splinter. She gasped, stumbling back, pressing against the cold wall. And in that moment she understood. She had never been the sole tenant of the house, never the only one lying in this room. The grieved child had not vanished into the meadow. She had dissolved into the walls, multiplied into every surface, leaving behind the endless echo of her small hands. Mary's knees gave way, and she sank onto the floor, trembling as the pale outlines closed in. The tapping resumed, soft now, almost soothing, surrounding her like a lullaby of knuckles on glass. Her eyes fluttered shut, too heavy to resist, and as she drifted toward sleep, she felt more hands resting on her shoulders, her arms, her hair, as if tucking her in. And in the silence before dreams took her, she realized the house had never wanted her fear. It had only wanted her company. Story 7. The Cursed Car. Los Angeles wears its nights differently than most cities. Out on the freeways, the lights stretch in endless ribbons, headlights weaving like beads on a string, and every sound seems to hum with the machinery of restless lives. But away from the glass towers and crowded boulevards, on the edges of forgotten neighborhoods, the city grows quiet, almost rural, where old warehouses lean against each other like tired men, and asphalt cracks into weeds. It was there, in one such corner, that the auction yard waited. The man, his name was Daniel, liked places like this. He had spent too many years in crowded apartments, in offices where air conditioning drowned out every human voice. He found comfort in the silence of metal hulks lined up in rows, each waiting for someone foolish enough to believe they could coax life back into them. He had always liked fixing things, and he had always needed something to keep his hands busy. That night, the air smelled of gasoline and dust. Sodium lights buzzed faintly overhead, throwing long shadows across the concrete. Daniel walked between the rows, his boots echoing. Most of the cars were dented, forgotten, repossessed. But one in particular stopped him. It was nothing special at first glance, an old black sedan, early 90s by the look of it. The paint dulled, the chrome pitted, one headlight fogged. But the moment Daniel saw it, he felt the strange tug in his chest, as though the car itself had turned its gaze toward him. He walked closer. The driver's door stood slightly ajar, a gap no wider than a breath. He pulled it open. The hinges groaned. The interior smelled faintly metallic, not just of oil and rust, but of something sharper, a scent like pennies left too long in the sunday. The seats were worn, cracked, but there were faint, darker stains along the upholstery, stains that no amount of soap could have erased. Daniel sat behind the wheel. The steering wheel was cold against his palms. For a moment he closed his eyes and listened. The auction yard around him was silent, the buzz of the lights distant. Yet from inside the cabin he swore he heard something else. A sigh, so soft it could have been the shift of old fabric. He opened his eyes quickly. The windshield stretched ahead, streaked with dust, but the yard beyond looked dimmer somehow, as though the car itself tinted the world darker. When the auctioneer's voice echoed across the lot, Daniel raised his hand without hesitation. He drove it home the next evening, the city lights streaking past the windows. The sedan's engine grumbled but held steady, carrying him down side streets, through intersections where the signals blinked amber. Other cars passed, but Daniel felt cocooned inside his, the world muffled. At a red light, he reached for the radio. Static hissed back. He adjusted the dial, turning slowly through stations, but the noise did not change. It was not ordinary static, it carried rhythm, rising and falling, almost like voices beneath water. He turned it off quickly, but the hiss lingered faintly, vibrating through the cabin. At the next stop sign, he glanced into the rearview mirror. For an instant, just an instant, he thought he saw movement in the back seat, a blur, the impression of faces pressed close, pale, and waiting. He blinked hard, and the seat was empty. The light turned green. He drove on, knuckles white against the wheel. That night, parked in the driveway, the sedan looked like any other tired car beneath the street lamp. But when Daniel closed the curtains in his room, he found himself unable to sleep, certain that if he returned to the window, the car would be staring back. He dreamed instead. He dreamed of glass breaking, of metal twisting, of voices shouting and cut short by the roar of impact. He woke gasping, chest tight, the faint echo of those voices still humming in his ears. And from outside, in the quiet Los Angeles night, he swore he heard the creak of the sedan's driver door opening on its own. Daniel told himself it was nothing, a trick of nerves, the product of gasoline fumes and a tired mind. He had bought the car because it was cheap, because he liked machines with history, because he believed in second chances, not because he thought they carried ghosts. Yet each night when the sun fell and the city bled neon into the dark, he found himself drawn to the sedan, keys cold in his palm, the urge to drive stronger than sleep. The first time he took it onto the freeway after midnight, Los Angeles felt hollow. The usual congestion was gone, lanes wide and empty, the lights above flickering against asphalt that stretched forever. The engine hummed beneath him, steady and low, and for a while the road felt endless, a ribbon carrying him out of time itself. But then the voices began. They slipped through the static of the radio even though it was off, faint at first, like someone whispering from beneath the seat cushions. He turned his head, checked the mirrors, found nothing but darkness behind him. Still, the whispers rose, weaving together into something almost like a conversation. Words bent and broken, syllables crushed, but unmistakably human. Did you see? The lights. Hold on, please. Too fast, too fast. His hands clenched the wheel, sweat slicking his palms. He muttered aloud to drown them out, telling himself it was memory lodged in the wiring, fragments of radio transmissions caught in faulty circuits. But the longer he drove, the clearer they became, not static at all, but voices locked in a loop of panic, each rising to a final wordless scream before cutting off into silence. He pulled onto the shoulder, engine idling, breath ragged. The city hummed in the distance, headlights of lone cars flickering far away. The interior of the sedan was dark, but not empty. He felt it, then eyes on him. He lifted the rearview mirror slowly. For an instant, he saw them. 3 figures crammed into the back seat, faces pale, skin torn, eyes glassy and fixed on him. Their mouths opened as one, but no sound came. He blinked, and the seat was empty. The silence pressed harder than the screams had. He drove again the next night. He told himself he had imagined it, that fear only grows when you flee from it. The sedan started on the first turn of the key, the engine purring as if pleased to be trusted. He merged onto side streets where street lamps flickered, their glow making the asphalt shimmer like water. The voices returned sooner. This time they were calm, almost conversational, as though acknowledging him. Not him, but maybe behind the wheel, always behind the wheel. Try again, try again. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, refusing to answer. But when he glanced at the passenger seat, he swore the cracked leather shifted faintly, an indentation forming as though someone sat there, watching. He muttered, "Leave me alone." The windshield fogged faintly, words traced across the glass from the inside, letters scrawled by unseen fingers. Drive. By the third drive, he no longer resisted. Something in the car compelled him, tugging at him like a leash. He slid behind the wheel, engine growling to life, and felt himself surrender to the rhythm of tires on asphalt. The city blurred by, empty streets stretching toward nowhere. The voices spoke clearly now, each one distinct. A woman crying softly in the back seat, a man shouting warnings, a child's voice begging to go home. Their words tangled, overlapping, but always circling him, always binding him to the wheel. He whispered back without meaning to, "I'm not you. I didn't die here." The steering wheel jerked under his hands. The sedan veered toward the guardrail before he yanked it back. His heart slammed in his chest. The voices rose in anger. "Ours now. Your turn. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop." He pulled into a gas station, stumbling out into the fluorescent light, breath ragged. The car idled behind him, engine thumping like a heartbeat, headlights glaring too bright. The attendant glanced at him, frowned, then at the sedan, and muttered something about bad luck clinging to certain machines. Daniel didn't answer. He could still hear the voices, muffled, waiting for him to climb back inside. That night he dreamed of the accident. He wasn't told about it. He wasn't shown photographs, but in sleep he saw it clearly. The sedan racing down a wet highway, tires shrieking, glass exploding as it slammed into another car. He saw faces torn open by impact, mouths wide in final screams. And then he saw himself behind the wheel, not as he was now, but as though he had always been there, a driver bound by fate. He woke gasping, heart pounding, the keys clenched in his hand, though he had not remembered picking them up. From outside came the sound of the car door opening with a slow groan. By the fourth night, Daniel could no longer dismiss the voices as tricks of the radio or figments of fatigue. They spoke with too much clarity, too much urgency, as though they remembered something he had never lived and yet carried within his bones. He began to wonder if the car itself was not simply haunted but alive, a vessel that had learned to keep its passengers long after their hearts had stopped. He forced himself to seek answers. The auction house gave him little, only that the sedan had been seized after sitting in a police impound for years. Its title shuffled through bureaucratic hands until no one wanted it anymore. But at the library, in the dim hum of microfilm machines, he found what he was looking for. A headline from the mid-90s, 4 dead in fiery crash on 405. The photo showed the mangled husk of a black sedan, its roof peeled back, its doors twisted open like broken limbs. He read the article 3 times. A young family returning from dinner. A sudden swerve. Witnesses claimed the car seemed to accelerate on its own before striking the guardrail and flipping into oncoming traffic. The driver's name was blurred by time, but the words, "No survivors," rang like a tolling bell. Daniel sat in the fluorescent hush, the roll of film flickering, his reflection pale in the screen. He felt the faint hum of voices again, not in the room but inside his skull. A chorus that whispered, "Yes, yes, you see now." He drove home slowly, but when he parked in front of his building, the sedan seemed heavier, as though the weight of its history had pressed down into the tires, anchoring it to the street. That night he swore he would not climb inside. He bolted his apartment door, left the keys on the counter, poured himself whiskey until his nerves softened. But sleep came brittle, broken by the sound of metal groaning outside his window. At 3 a.m., he rose and peered through the blinds. The sedan sat beneath the street lamp, but its headlights flickered faintly, as though someone had turned the key. He stood there, transfixed, until he realized the driver's door was open and the faint outline of a figure sat behind the wheel. By the time he stumbled outside, the seat was empty. The car waited, patient, the keys somehow heavy again in his pocket. He had no memory of picking them up. The next drive was worse. The freeway lay deserted, but the car carried more than him. He felt the weight of bodies pressing into the seats, the warmth of breath that was not his own fogging the glass. In the rearview mirror, faces appeared, not fleeting this time, but solid. A man with blood across his temple, a woman cradling something in her arms, a child staring with wide, glassy eyes. Their mouths moved in silence at first, but soon the sound filled the cabin. "You are behind the wheel. You are with us. It never ends." Daniel's hands shook. He whispered, "I'm not your driver. I wasn't there." The steering wheel vibrated, tightening beneath his grip as though another set of hands pressed against his. The speedometer climbed, though his foot barely touched the pedal. Wind roared against the glass, headlights stretching into streaks. The voices rose to a scream. "Too fast. Too fast. Hold on." The sedan swerved, tires shrieking, before Daniel wrenched it back into the lane, chest heaving, throat raw. For a moment, he thought he would lose control, join their endless loop, become another shadow in the back seat. But the car slowed on its own, coasting to a stop along the shoulder. The engine idled calmly, purring as though nothing had happened. Daniel sat there, knuckles white, sweat dripping down his temples, the voices whispering faintly around him, patient once more. He began to notice changes when he was not driving. The car door opening at odd hours, the smell of gasoline and smoke seeping into his apartment even when windows were shut. Once, as he brushed his teeth, he looked into the bathroom mirror and swore a figure sat behind him, faint as a reflection from glass he could not escape. He spoke less to friends, avoided calls, drifted through his days, half awake. At night he returned to the sedan, unable to stop himself. Each time he promised it would be the last, and each time the voices coaxed him back with the soft certainty of inevitability. "We are not done with you. You know the road now. It is your turn to carry us." The final straw came when he parked at a diner outside the city. He sat in the booth with coffee growing cold, staring through the window at the sedan waiting in the lot. To anyone else it looked ordinary, another tired car beneath the buzzing lamps, but Daniel saw the faint shapes pressing against the glass from inside, mouths moving, fingers smearing the fog. When he left, he found the passenger door open. The seatbelt hung loose, swinging faintly. He closed it with shaking hands, slid behind the wheel, and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The dashboard lights flickered, the radio hissed, and then, through the static, the words came clear. Drive until it ends. The nights grew longer for Daniel. He no longer fought the urge to drive. Resistance seemed pointless. Each evening, as the city dimmed and the streets emptied, the keys found their way into his hand. Sometimes he swore he left them on the counter, buried under bills or tucked deep in a drawer, but by dusk they were always waiting in his pocket, heavy and expectant. He told himself he was still in control, but the truth bled through in small betrayals. The engine started before he turned the key. The radio hissed, though it was unplugged. The headlights flickered alive the moment he touched the door handle, casting their pale beams down the street like eyes opening after sleep. The car wanted him, and each night he surrendered more easily. The freeway at midnight was a black ribbon, stretching beyond reason, the sodium lamps flickering overhead like watchful stars. Daniel sat rigid behind the wheel, but the steering no longer belonged to him. He felt the wheel tremble beneath his hands, tugging gently, guiding the sedan into curves before he had time to react. The pedals pressed themselves. The speed climbed without weight on his foot. The voices filled the cabin, louder now. No longer whispers, but a chorus. A woman sobbing. A man shouting warnings. A child chanting something Daniel could not understand. The same words over and over in a rhythm that matched the thud of the tires. He tried to speak above them, his voice raw. "I'm not your driver. I don't belong here." The wheel jerked hard, nearly pulling him into the guardrail. The chorus screamed as one, high and furious, before falling silent again, leaving only the roar of the engine and the drum of his heartbeat. He began to see the crash, not just in dreams but with his waking eyes. At intersections, glass seemed to hang suspended in the air like frozen rain. On the overpass, he glimpsed the twisted shape of another car ahead, but when he blinked, it was gone, leaving only the empty stretch of road. Sometimes he saw the faces reflected in the windshield, pressed against the glass from the inside, eyes wide and accusing. Once, at a red light, the seatbelt snapped across his chest, locking him in place without his hand touching it. The buckle clicked on its own, cold metal against his hip. When the light turned green, the sedan surged forward like a predator loosed from a leash, and Daniel realized with a cold sinking dread that he could not get out, not unless the car allowed him to. He searched for help. He went to a mechanic, muttered excuses about faulty wiring, strange noises. The man laughed, shook his head, said he'd seen plenty of cursed cars in his time, but all they needed was a new battery or some brake work. Yet when the mechanic opened the hood, the laughter stopped. The engine was pristine, too pristine. Every part gleamed. Every bolt seemed untouched by years, as though the crash had never happened. The man backed away, muttering he couldn't help, that some machines belonged to themselves. Daniel drove home with his hands trembling. The car purred beneath him, content. That night the chorus grew louder. They did not beg anymore. They commanded. Faster. Don't stop. You know the road now. The sedan lunged forward, tires screaming, speedometer climbing past numbers Daniel had never dared. His eyes blurred with tears. The wind clawed at the edges of the glass, and through the roar he heard the crash repeating, over and over, not as memory but as rehearsal. He knew what they wanted. They wanted him to join them, to shatter into steel and fire, to become another echo in the endless loop. He screamed back, his voice breaking, "Not me. I won't." But his words dissolved in the rush of air, swallowed by the sound of metal bending, the phantom memory of their final scream. When the car finally slowed, coasting to a stop beneath a dead street lamp, Daniel sat trembling, seatbelt still locked across his chest, knuckles white. He realized then that there was no road he could take that would not end in them. Every turn brought him closer. Every mile was another step into their memory. The sedan did not want freedom. It wanted repetition, and Daniel was already part of the loop. The city blurred past in streaks of orange sodium and red taillights, but Daniel barely saw it anymore. His eyes were fixed on the dark stretch of freeway ahead, and even that seemed to dissolve, shimmering with the weight of memory that was not his own. The wheel no longer belonged to him. Not really. He felt its tremors under his hands, the way it shifted slightly left, then right, the way the pedals pressed down without his foot. He sat in the driver's seat, but he was no more than a passenger strapped in too tightly to leave. The voices no longer whispered. They spoke clearly now, filling the cabin, each one distinct. The woman's low moan, the man's barked orders. the child's thin chant. They spoke not to each other but to him, weaving him into their loop, assigning him a role he had not chosen. You are here. You are with us. Drive it again. Daniel's throat burned from shouting, from begging, from denying. I don't belong to you, he rasped, but the words had grown weak even to his own ears. The seatbelt tightened across his chest, clicking again as though reminding him it had already chosen otherwise. The crash returned in fragments, headlights flaring in the mirror, steel twisting, the sound of glass exploding inward. He saw it not just ahead but all around, ghostly images shimmering across the windshield, like film projected on the night. Each fragment ended the same way: screams, silence, fire. But this time, the fragments didn't fade. They lingered, layered, until the freeway itself seemed crowded with phantoms. Daniel swerved through lanes that should have been empty, only to find himself driving between wrecks that dissolved as he passed, hearing cries from windows that had no passengers. The sedan knew the way. The road bent into memory, pulling him toward the exact place where it had all ended years before. The guardrail glinted faintly, bent and scarred. The asphalt seemed darker there, as though still soaked with oil and blood. His pulse thundered. He whispered, "Not again." The chorus answered in unison. Always again. The wheel locked beneath his hands. The speedometer climbed, the roar of the engine deepening. The headlights flared too bright, blinding. Daniel felt the car tilt, the tires slipping as though water slicked the road though the asphalt was dry. The guardrail rushed closer, inevitable, magnetic. He braced, but there was no stopping it. The impact exploded through the cabin metal folding, glass slicing the air, the scream of steel tearing itself apart. For a moment, he felt himself thrown forward, the belt catching sharp, the air filled with fire. He thought it was the end, but it wasn't. He opened his eyes, gasping, and found himself back in the driver's seat, the sedan idling calmly at the shoulder of an empty road. His hands clutched the wheel, unmarked. The windshield was whole. The dashboard lights glowed steady. For a moment, he thought he had imagined it all. A dream within a drive. But then he glanced in the mirror. They were there. The man, the woman, the child, pale and silent, eyes fixed on him. Their mouths moved, and this time he heard their words clearly. Now you know. Now you are one of us. Daniel's throat closed. He tore at the seatbelt, clawed at the latch, but it refused to release. His hands passed through the buckle as though it were not there at all. Panic surged, but his body felt heavy, sluggish, as though the weight of the other passengers pressed against him from all sides. The engine rumbled softly, almost content. The road stretched forward, endless. He drove again, but now the city never came closer. No matter how far the tires carried him, no matter which exit he chose, the lights always curved back into the same stretch of freeway, the same guardrail waiting, the same loop of memory pressing in. The clock on the dash no longer changed. The gas gauge never moved. Time had folded. The sedan was not a machine anymore. It was a trap, and Daniel was no longer its owner, no longer its driver, no longer even its prisoner. He was part of it, a passenger etched into the fabric of its steel, another voice in the chorus. When he glanced at the mirror again, he saw not just the three faces, but a fourth now, pale and hollow-eyed, sitting among them, his own. Los Angeles forgets easily. The auction yard sells again. A mechanic wipes his hands and mutters about unlucky cars. Someone else will raise a hand at the right price. Someone else will sit behind the wheel and feel the cold tremor of the steering column. And when they do, the voices will stir again, patient and eager, ready to show the road without exit. And so the stories end. Or perhaps they do not. Perhaps they linger, the way a voice lingers after the radio is switched off, the way an empty room still feels occupied when you close the door. You've walked with me through mirrors and dolls, through whispers in wood and cloth, through tapping hands and restless roads. And maybe, as you drift toward sleep, you'll remember that not everything broken wishes to be fixed. Not every silence is truly empty, and not every knock comes from outside. The night is still with you. It always island. But don't be afraid. Fear is only a reminder that you're listening. And the stories, well, they were already waiting here, long before you arrived. Rest now. Let the dark carry you. And if you wake to a sound at your window, a whisper in your hallway, or the hum of an engine idling in the distance, perhaps it's only the night, asking you to listen again. Until next time, keep the lights low and keep listening.